Anand, you set the stage, and I think this is going to be a great one.
Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it. Yeah, we've got a really, as Mark is calling it, epic lineup for today, and I love that word because it is an epic time in cannabis. And I wanted to start off by thanking the 361 community, because it's because of community members and the prep and the planning that happens in meetings like the ones we do that leads to such great panels, and the diversity that we have. Minorities, women who have very significant experience in the cannabis space. And it's all just a matter of networking and knowing enough people, because the diversity exists. And so I'm very proud to say that we were able to represent that. So I'm just going to give a few high level points, and then I'm going to start with the keynote speakers, starting with Tim. So in terms of timing for this event, because we wanted to get so many angles on what's happening in the cannabis space, we have a pretty jam-packed set of panels here. So the keynote is, running about 7 minutes late, no big deal. We have 4 main keynotes, and then up till about 12:15. If somebody's running a little over, as everybody who's been to these meetings knows before, I start to change my background to yellow as just an indicator that we're kind of running to wrap up your thoughts. And then what we're going to do is start off with the spotlight videos. Most speakers, if not all, have recorded a spotlight video, so I'll play that. And then we'll go into any kind of slides that the speaker might have to kind of define how they're involved in the cannabis space and what their background and experience is. And then I'll move on to potentially asking some Q&A, or to go through all the main speakers, and then circling back with the Q&A at the end, so I make sure everybody gets enough time. In terms of the audience, feel free to put your questions as we're going through the event into the chat. We'd love to highlight some of them. We're not going to have a lot of Q&A time per panel, but towards the end of the session, where a lot of the summarizing of all the things we've gone over happens in the town hall section, you'll get a lot of Q&A and interaction at that point. Not every speaker is going to be able to stay to that point, but I'm just giving that as background. So the goal of our events, and this is a great partnership between Bar Capital 361 firm and the community here, is to really educate you about what's happening in real time underlying this space. A lot of the headlines and kind of publicly available information is just scratching the surface. And there's been folks involved in the space now for 6-7 years, and that's in cannabis years, that is like a generation. All right, so it's a long time. I'm going to also highlight that in understanding what's happening in the space, you really have to look at where things are. I got involved after California went recreational, because I said this ball is now snowballing, and there's no going back. But we're back at safe banking being pushed through the House. The Senate is in a different environment currently than it was even clearly a year ago, and at the same time we have these huge deficits in every budget from local to federal. And so this is the moment for cannabis. I mean, it doesn't mean it's going to get legalized tomorrow, but the dominoes are really lined up. And the biggest domino, in my opinion, the first domino, is safe banking. And if that passes and the banking lobby is aligned with the cannabis industry, lots of great things are going to happen. And so I'll give you one other quick kind of anecdote in terms of where cannabis stands in popular culture, and also at the senator level, where this really matters in understanding what it is as an industry and changing perception. And I'll do this with a quick demo. So everybody who knows me for a period of time knows I wear glasses, right? And so that's kind of part of my brand. But I got LASIK about a month ago, and so I don't need these. They're completely powerless. And your perceptions as I took off my glasses changed about me. If you're seeing me for the first time, quite literally somewhere in your subconscious or your past experiences, I'm not potentially as intelligent as I was a minute ago. And other opinions have formed. For cannabis, that moment is coming where it will go from being a vice to be seen as equivalent to alcohol or aspirin, as I describe it. So that moment is building both from a political level as well as a cultural level, and it's a very, very exciting time. For the next 2 to 5 years, it's going to be, really, really exciting to be part of it. So I'll stop there opining, and I'm going to turn it over to our keynote panel, and first off to Tim Seymour, who many of you obviously know from his appearances on CNBC. I'm going to play your video real quick here, Tim, and then I will turn it over to you. Or Mark, if
you want to take the share.
Yeah, sure. Let me do the share here real quick because I've got it queued up. So I'm going to share this, and hopefully everybody can hear everybody can see the video now. Correct?
Yep.
Okay. Here we go.
Hey, good morning. My name is Tim Seymour. I am the portfolio manager of the Amplify Seymour Cannabis ETF, ticker CNBS. I'm also a member of the investment committee at JW Asset Management, which is one of the largest cannabis-focused hedge funds in the space, certainly an early player in the space. I advise a number of companies in the cannabis sector. I work with Houlihan Lokey, helping them build out their cannabis practice. I've been talking about cannabis on CNBC for the last 5 or 6 years and trying to focus investors' attention on what I think really are the exciting investment dynamics here. We know that this is a very important social story and cultural story and an evolution. It's also soon to be and becoming maybe even now a very sophisticated consumer product story. My background's in emerging markets. A lot of the parallels to me for cannabis investing, I think I've seen over the years in the world of these emerging countries. But this emerging asset class is here. Excited to be part of the 420 Summit. Congrats to 361 firm and Bar Capital for getting us all together. Looking forward to being part of today's discussion.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you for recording the spotlight videos. Makes things much more efficient. So I'm going to queue up your slides, Tim, and feel free to take the floor now.
Thanks, Anand. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, exciting day. We all know what day on the calendar it is, and I think talking about the sector for me is talking about there's so many really in-depth participants in the sector today. So I'm going to stick to the investing world, and I'm going to stick to really my ETF world, because I think the relative infancy and the relative inefficiency of this industry. First of all, at work today, if I look at the screens in front of me that show the industry is down 3 to 5%, U.S., Canada, global, wherever, ancillary tech, you name it. These are all ways to invest in the sector at a time when the fundamentals are about as good as they could have been expected to have been at this point in history if you'd asked me 2 years ago. So the exciting news on SAFE in the House, yeah, we've kind of been there before. I'm not sure this even begins to address capital markets and listing standards. A lot of the folks tuned in today are institutional investors, and a lot of institutional capitals on the sidelines. And that's just one of the dynamics that I think is important to talk about. This first slide just is more about what I just gave on my intro. I'll simply say, we launched this ETF 2 years ago. Excited that it's been a performer, but one that's been a way for people to invest thematically in the sector in an active capacity with a fund manager in myself, who's spent a lot of time investing in new asset classes. And so if you're investing in cannabis, fundamentals are to be, viewed through a lens of macro and top down and then bottom up. And as I mentioned, as an emerging markets guy, I remember when investing in Brazil or in Russia was as simple as understanding where the next IMF tranche of money was going to come from. Similar to cannabis on the legislative map, we know what happened north of the border. We know as the states unfolded, and obviously California in January 2018 was really the wake-up call for our country. My other roles, as I mentioned, I'm investing on the private side, and I sit inside of the investment committee of one of the biggest hedge funds at JW Asset, and we've been looking at the sector for a while. Just on CNBC, it's just as simple as saying, look, When I first started having the conversation, the goal was to not have this be Cheech and Chong B-roll and bong water sound effects that inevitably my executive producer at the time started rolling in the background. And and actually, with all due respect to Tommy Chong and Cheech Marin, who actually have been really important part of this industry, it's really, to me, about looking at this industry from a perspective of a sophisticated consumer products industry. So if you roll to the next slide, you can see a little bit about what we're doing inside of the ETF. Ultimately, as I've listed here, we're a ETF that's trying to be very much investing in cannabis, not investing in tobacco companies that might be here, not investing in pharma companies that might be here, but investing in companies. So more than 80% of the portfolio has to have more than 50% of the revenue stream coming from cannabis. Look, my role is both as someone that's in the industry every day. I'm constantly meeting with companies or industry leaders or other investors, or, I think it's really critical to be involved in the sector and be involved in the sector on a daily basis because of the pace of change. And I think, whether it's been IPOs, that we've been able to invest in as they've been coming out. And so, a couple of ones you can see listed there were ones that we participated in, day one of allocations. And that's pretty exciting. I think there's going to be a lot more of that going on. M&A taking place, a lot of that going on. At times, corporate governance events have been unfolding by the minute that have meant, hands off on a bunch of companies. And I think that's also really important. As an EM guy, corporate governance, that's all people ever talked about in emerging markets. And yet I think in cannabis, it's important to talk about those dynamics. One of the exciting things that's we've announced today is that we can now invest in the entire spectrum of U.S. plant touching or ancillary or Canadian or global. So it's important that we followed what we thought was a very conservative approach to investing as a 40 Act governed SEC product. It's an ETF, and therefore we made this move when we felt we actually had we had a lot of confidence in what was going on in the background. So the goal of the portfolio is to be thematic, but it's also to be tactical. And I'll just say simply, a lot of people I'm sure people focused here on cannabis today have been aware of this whole U.S. versus Canada dynamic. At times it's been emotional. At times it's been a dangerous red herring for a lot of investors investing in Canadian names who have been listed on the New York Stock Exchange because they could, while U.S. companies who might have better fundamentals, who might have a much bigger addressable market, not surprisingly, look, like in every other sector and product category in the world, the United States is the biggest, most interesting market. Why shouldn't it be in cannabis? And it is. But following capital flows as an emerging markets investor is an important dynamic of what I have to do as a portfolio manager. And again, part of today's messaging from everybody is this is an industry that's evolving, and the way people access it and invest in it is something that I have to be have kind of my finger on the pulse of. It's like investing in Russia, and I lived in Russia for a couple of years, and I was partners in a Russian investment bank. People woke up to emerging markets a lot earlier, than whenever it was that we were knocking on their door. But the holy grail on some level for us as capital markets guys was when you think of Russia, for example, you think of oil and gas and natural resources. You think of, at least from the investable perspective, you think of a lot of things when you think of Russia. But getting Fidelity's oil and gas analysts, not just their generalist, not their EM guy, but their oil and gas sector specific analysts to be investing in Russian oil and gas assets was a very big day, and it was kind of a holy grail day. And for cannabis investors, getting sophisticated CPG, whether it's consumer products or retail or obviously pharma and some of the other things that we know about, when they come into this industry, it's going to be a game changer. And that's part of the exposure that I want, our investors to have. Next slide, please. Simply, I'm not going to get into this. I don't think we're doing things that differently than a lot of fund managers do, but I think there's a process. There's an investable universe, which, as I mentioned, just grew. I care a lot about top down. I care a lot about bottom up. I care a lot about exogenous factors, and let's just be clear, cannabis is going through a kind of a scary time right now in terms of, if you look at the charts, as mentioned, at a time when the fundamentals are really, I think on a relative basis to where they were, extraordinary. You've seen assets pull all the way back to kind of almost Georgia runoff levels, where the composition of the Senate and the implications of that for cannabis legislation hadn't even been decided yet we pulled back to those levels. Some of this is about being tactical, and right now it's scary if you're a cannabis investor, because here's cannabis in a bear market at a time when global markets are all-time highs. And I'll tell you, as an EM guy, if global markets are in turmoil, higher beta, higher volatility asset classes are not going to perform well. So we're missing a really interesting point, but we're all in this for the long trade. Next slide, please. And I think that's really the ultimate message here. And just look, this is a little bit of grandstanding. I mean, I think this ETF has outperformed the space. It's outperformed its competitors because I think of being active and being in the middle of the industry. I think the most important thing we can continue to do here is to be investing alongside of a sector that is continuing to evolve, and that's both the broadening of the investment landscape, and that's through ancillary trades, technology trades, companies that we're seeing on the private equity side and the hedge fund that are slowly getting ready for that listing opportunity, and we see them and they're real. And it's not cannabis 1.0 and 2.0. It's probably closer to 3.0, but there's going to be so many phases of this development. Next slide, please. I just recap it there. I'm looking forward to being involved in the conversation today, but if you want to tune in once a week, I do a weekly where I go through what I think are the critical issues, both in the macro, the markets themselves, and then talk about asset allocation within the sector. So thanks for the time this morning, and really great to be here at an exciting moment in history for cannabis.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate that. And I'll ask one question, and then I'll kind of do the other panelists. You've been involved since when in the cannabis industry, just so the audience is aware?
In 2015.
2015. So quite a while in the cannabis space. And how have you seen? You described cannabis 3.0. What do you think is the key difference in companies kind of today? Obviously, some have developed over this time, and they've just benefited from capital raises and growth in the industry, but are you seeing a difference in the kind of deal flow that's coming across kind of your circulation in terms of sophistication or management or any of those factors?
It's night and day, but the biggest thing that defines the industry now is profitability. So this isn't growth at all costs. This isn't capital destructive infrastructure build out to nowhere. This isn't valuing companies on an asset-based valuation. It's about evaluating companies on profitability and the strategic fit between M&A deals, not just, hey, 1 + 1 = 3. In 1.0, and I would argue that was the M&A, and really 1.5. It was 1 + 1 was thought to equal 3 when in fact it equaled 1.3. 2.0 was more sophisticated C-suite and evolution of just on the operators, and 3.0 right now is about companies that are very, very profitable. There's big debates. There's all kinds of themes that are going to be talked about today, I bet. Asset light, asset heavy, interstate commerce. Some people might say the market is talking right now when you see that some of these MSOs who are highly, highly profitable have a substantial moat around their business. How could they be trading the way they've traded over the last 8 weeks? Is that an indictment of the model? I don't think so, but these are themes that are defining the sophistication of the industry now relative to where we were.
Thank you. I absolutely agree with that. It's been amazing also during the COVID period. I think it was so hard to raise capital for cannabis companies that the bad ideas just didn't make it through, and also more experienced people from other industries are entering. So exciting times. So I'll keep rolling along the panel, and we'll circle back for more Q&A. But thank you, Tim, for that background. So next up here is Chris Crane, which I will queue up the video for you here, Chris, and then turn it over to you in a minute here. Let me play this now.
There was a question in the chat that might play to him. Is that trying to understand what exactly how that House has passed?
Yes,
He
we're gonna.
he may be covering that.
Yeah, we're gonna jump into that. Chris is the right person to speak to on that front. So here we go.
Hi, my name is Chris Crane, and I am the president and co-founder of Forefront Ventures. We are a multi-state operator here in the U.S., operating across 6 states currently. We've been around for about 10 years, so we've kind of seen it all in the space. Prior to this, I spent my career in cannabis and drug policy advocacy, having served as associate director of NORML and the executive director of Students for Sensible Drug Policy. I am currently the vice chair of the board of directors of the National Cannabis Industry Association, as well as serving on a number of trade association board of directors as well. I'm also involved in the space globally through my role as a principal in Anderson Leonard Pharmaceuticals. We are a licensed cultivator, producer, exporter in the Republic of North Macedonia, which I believe is positioned to be a natural low-cost producer, exporter country for the emerging European cannabis market. So happy to talk about that as well. I'm excited to join the 361 global community this 420 and look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And if you're on the line here, yep, I see you there. Please feel free to kind of give some context around how you're involved currently. And by the way, to all speakers and panelists, that feel free to share your screen directly as well if you've got any slides you want to share. But I'll kind of open up to you, Chris, to kind of first answer perhaps the burning question that folks have, which is, where do we stand in terms of cannabis regulation? Where do you see this current safe banking bill going and then beyond?
Sure. So that's a great question. I think it's the one that's sort of the topic that's on everybody's mind right now, given that safe banking just passed the House yesterday for the second time in 2 years. So that was great to see. It was not unexpected, although it did happen, I think, a little faster than many of us would have thought. The real question, of course, is whether or not this is going to pass the Senate and become law. I'm not one to make predictions on these things, but I do follow it fairly closely. If I had to guess, I would say that it likely will become law this year. I do think it's a matter of timing and vehicle. So right now, what's happening with the political dynamics in the Senate is we almost certainly have the 60 votes needed to pass safe banking as a standalone. However, there is a lot of pressure on Senate Majority Leader Schumer in particular to first take up a bill that does more to address issues of equity and making sure that there's sort of paths to participation in the industry for communities that have been most impacted by prohibition. And while banking does that to a degree in terms of making capital available to equity operators in a way that it currently isn't, and that's why it's supported by an organization like the Minority Cannabis Business Association, it's not seen as an equity-focused or equity-forward bill. And so if they don't go for an equity-focused bill, something like the MORE Act or whatever the bill is that Senator Schumer and Senator Booker are going to be introducing here imminently, if they don't do that first, you may lose some support from folks like Senator Booker and others on the left for safe banking because they think it doesn't adequately address address the equity issues. So I think the way that this is going to play out is that the Senate will likely take up the new bill, we'll call it MORE Act 2.0, because we don't know yet exactly what's going to be in it. I think they'll take that up first because that's a much broader ranging bill. And hey, if we're lucky enough to get that passed, that also addresses banking, right? So and the House would be able to pass a broader reform bill. They passed the MORE Act last year, so that would solve the issue if they can pass that. I'm quite pessimistic that will pass. I don't think we have 50 votes, let alone 60 for full legalization in the Senate right now, because I don't think we have every Democrat on board yet. And so my guess is that that will play out first. And then once that does not pass, they then come back to safe banking as the compromise that then folks like Booker and others can say, look, we tried on the broader bill. Let's get the low hanging fruit taken care of. It's also possible that this gets rolled into a larger spending bill later on this year and gets passed as an amendment to a bigger bill rather than as a standalone. But I think chances are quite high that we do get banking reform passed as part of this Congress.
And what does that exactly mean for our audience, which varies in terms of their knowledge of what exactly the bill is about? If safe banking passes, how does business change for the average cannabis company from now to this post-bill passing period?
Well, I don't think we fully know yet, to be frank. But there are some things that I think we do know, and there are some other things that we can speculate on. The one thing that we do know is it will make it a lot easier for cannabis companies to get bank accounts, and that seems like a relatively small thing, but it's actually a pretty big deal, right? Even though we have the FinCEN guidance today, and most cannabis companies have a bank account, the fees for those bank accounts are incredibly high. They're often in places that are really inconvenient for the businesses. By way of example, one of our stores in Chicago fell victim to some of the looting that happened last year. And part of the issue that we have was, the bank that we use, the only bank that we've been able to use in Illinois, is located in Southern Illinois, and so they're only able to do cash drops twice a week if we're lucky. Right, rather than every night being able to just go down to the local bank and make a cash drop. And so it makes us more of a target for these types of robberies and lootings than we might otherwise be if we were able to bank like anybody else. So just the day-to-day functions of banking are going to be a lot easier. The big question is, what does it do for investment? My guess on this is that major investment firms are still likely going to sit on the sideline at least until there's broader federal reform, right? Because still banking businesses that are illegal under federal law, there comes a lot of risk with that. But I do think some will jump in. I mean, we're at a place now where for the last few years, a lot of individuals who are part of larger firms have been making investments into cannabis businesses. Some institutional firms have started to get in. And so I think that this likely, I don't think it opens the floodgates, but I think it starts a trickle, so to speak, right? It's a crack in the dam, and we do start to see some institutional investment coming into the space. I also think it opens up a lot of individual investors who have been sitting on the sidelines that are going to see this as a permission slip for them to start getting involved. So I think we will see a very meaningful injection of new capital into the industry. I think it likely means that the valuations for the publicly traded US MSOs likely go up once this passes, right? Because people know that this new injection of capital is coming in. Unfortunately, as it's currently written, it likely does not mean US companies will get access to the NYSE or the NASDAQ the way the Canadian companies do. That would be a major game changer, but I don't think that this quite accomplishes that. It's not explicitly spelled out, and so I think they'll likely be risk averse enough to that they likely won't start allowing US MSOs in. But I do think we'll see a real wave of new capital entering the space, and it will be a big boom for everybody, including the smaller operators. Because right now, when you talk about smaller businesses and social equity operators in particular, they're without the ability for them to go and get a bank loan. And that's the other thing that I think will open up, right? Smaller banks, community banks, local banks will likely start making lines of credit available to businesses, particularly those that are located in their state, which are currently not available to them. That's a major game changer for the social equity applicants and smaller businesses who right now have very few opportunities to access capital outside of going to one of the major operators who are looking for more market penetration in their state by taking pieces of smaller businesses.
And could you talk about, you mentioned Macedonia as a focus of yours in one of the projects you're working on. I'm imagining some international banking might open up too, or at least companies being able to have a clearer picture of local banking, maybe less, international banking as far as facilitating it may improve. But could you talk more about Macedonia and what you see as far as Europe as an opportunity?
Absolutely. So yes, I am a principal in Anderson Leonard Pharmaceuticals. We're a licensed cultivator in the Republic of North Macedonia, currently raising capital to build out our GMP facility. Also looking at Macedonia as what may very well be the first country in Europe to legalize for adult use. There's a major push happening there. The parliamentary process is happening. The Prime Minister is very supportive of this. So we like to be early for these kinds of developments, and so want to be on the ground before this happens. And we are there as one of the licensed licensees in the country. Not promising that'll happen, but there is a good chance of it by later on this year. But really, what attracted me to North Macedonia is, I'm trying to look at this a few years out and looking at, what are the countries that are going to be, sort of natural consumer countries? What are going to be countries that will be sort of natural hubs for the production of consumer packaged goods? And what are the countries that are sort of natural fits for low cost production, really low cost cultivation at scale? And for that, you've got to look at countries that have a history of large scale commercial agriculture, that are well situated from a climate standpoint, but also have very low costs of water, power, land, and labor, as well as access to major consumer markets. And I think you also, in addition to those, want to look for countries that meet those criteria, but that also have a head start and a government that's been that has really embraced being that type of producer country. So when we look at the Western Hemisphere and the North American markets, right, when international commerce opens up, I think a country like Colombia has really well positioned themselves to be a natural low-cost producer country. I think Mexico is, they're a little bit further behind in terms of the legislative process, but they're getting close. And I think they, given how big of a producer country they are for commercial agriculture in general, will be really well situated. And this is especially when you're thinking about producing the biomass, right, and the ingredients that will go into the final consumer packaged goods. That's going to be able to be produced a lot more cost efficiently in places like Mexico and Colombia than it will be in California or even in the United States. I think most of the CPG goods eventually that are produced in the US are likely going to include biomass that's been grown in these producer countries. And when you look at Europe, and you look at the countries that are situated, I think North Macedonia is probably the best situated country right now, because they have the lowest cost of land, labor, power, water on the European continent. It's an EU candidate country, so there's free trade with Europe. They should be in the EU within the next few years, and from a regulatory standpoint, have a major head start on other countries like, say, Bulgaria. Albania would be similarly situated, but it's not really a country you can feel comfortable doing business in, because it's kind of a narco state in terms of who's running the government there. So I looked at Macedonia as the place where, when the race to the bottom for cultivation at scale for the European markets happens, right, that's where you're ultimately going to want to be. And so was able to partner with actually my college roommate, someone I've been very close friends with for 25 years, who is extremely well connected both politically and in the business community there, which is really important when you're dealing with with a smaller country like North Macedonia. And we're able to obtain that license fairly early on, so that we can already be there when everybody starts sort of racing to these producer countries, especially in Europe.
Great. Thank you, Chris. That's a really good perspective. Appreciate it on a broad range of items. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And so I'll move along in terms of the keynote speakers, and then circle back at the end to open it up for the whole panel. And so next up we have Paul Beatty, and again, everybody was very good about uploading their video. So I'm going to play Paul's video and then turn it over to him.
Morning. Thanks very much. 361 Farm for having me out, Mark, and really do appreciate it. My name is Paul Beatty. I teach at the World Fund up in Canada. I've had the opportunity to invest in probably over 200 campus stocks over the last couple of years. We've been in since the very beginning, but really news. We've done awfully well in the space. We have a good idea.
Anand, you may want to just hear it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, I think the audio didn't come across too great on that clip. So, Paul, I'm just going to turn it over to you. So
can you hear me now, man?
Yeah.
Yep,
now it's clear.
Sorry about that. Obviously, technically, we're not that competent. I don't know why the audio didn't work. Anyway, listen, it's very simple story. My name is Paul Beatty. We run a hedge fund here in Montreal and Toronto. We've been investing quite aggressively in the cannabis space for 3 years now. We love the space. It's our largest industry weighting. We've probably met with and or invested in over 200 firms now. It's hard to imagine, but the industry grew that quickly in public companies, right? Or companies that private about to go public. We think we have a good idea of where the value is, and then I guess the one big message I wanted to bring to everybody today is we think it's an opportunity of a lifetime, really, and we've been saying this for 2 years now. We've documented that it's very rare in your life you're going to see an emerging industry where the business already exists. So look, it's very simple math. It's a $50 billion market in the US alone. So if you have a $50 billion market, you should have a value of 3 times at a minimum amount. So you've got 150 billion in market cap to build over the next couple of years that already exists. It's got to transfer from maybe the black market to more legitimate sources, but you know it's there. And right now, if you add up the value of all the public companies in the US, you only get to 50. So we are very bullish on the space, and the trend's going to continue. I can say that without a doubt. We also like, as Tim was pointing out, one of the other speakers, you can now look at profitability in some of the US players. It really is quite amazing just how these companies are ramping up. You know, margins of Verano came out with margins of 47% EBITDA margins. Okay, this is a company that's only been around 4 or 5 years. So I think it's great south of the border. And I guess one of the other messages I'd like to bring to you today is what is going on in the Canadian market is anything but positive. And so one has a terrific opportunity, I think, to hedge out all your exposure if you want in the space, because you can go short the Canadian larger cap players that already have terrific valuations, but zero sign of profitability. We've seen the numbers are coming out every day now in Canada. The big players are really disappointing. I mean, COVID is not helping, I think, in many ways, but the reality is the government's too involved north of the border. And so here's a great opportunity. You got an investment opportunity of a lifetime, and then you got a way to hedge it out. Anybody who's ignoring this market, I think, or these opportunities is crazy, because in an expensive market, expensive financial markets, this is truly a gift for investors. So we're quite bullish. We're looking to launch in the US. We're looking to find US investors that want to get involved. We think you should do it in a hedged way if you can. We think the natural hedge is there. It's there for anybody to see. It's not that complicated. And why would you invest in, like, I was just on the phone this morning with the latest company, Ascend is going public up here in Canada, but it's a US MSO. Ascend is it's already profitable. It's been profitable almost from the day it started. These guys have a market cap going out that's going to be less than the 5 biggest players in Canada. They make more money already than all 5 of them. So, it's just so straightforward. You buy the company that makes money, and hyper growth, they're going to be in New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Massachusetts, and you get a cheaper valuation on all metrics. I think it's exciting, right? It's very exciting. To your last 2 speakers' point, where's the business going? From a opportunity point of view with the public markets in the States, we think the SAFE Act, that'd be great if it happened this year. We do think that the stock markets in the US are probably going to be more aggressive than they have been. Once the SAFE Act passes, we think the NASDAQ is probably just going to say, we're prepared to take the risk and we're prepared to list some of these companies. I think that's a very logical thing to do. You guys were talking about emerging markets before. There used to be laws against Russian companies being listed on the US exchange. Well, moves happen by the exchange making decisions to allow Russian companies to be listed in America. And I think you could take it's quite logical to take a little bit more aggressive view on the timing of when that's going to happen, and that's going to be the game changer in terms of valuation. So it's exciting. It's evolving, and I can tell you, just to reemphasize this, and I'll leave it, this last point, is that as it is more complicated in the U.S., as it takes more time and every day that goes by where it's not clear at the federal level, I can tell you the MSOs, the U.S. operators, existing operators, are getting stronger and stronger. And the rest of the world is getting less and less, or having fewer and fewer opportunities to invest in America at an operating level cheaply. So I think the days of getting in cheaply are over. But I think just the delays of getting in for some of these Canadian big boys is it's just dragging out too long, and therefore they're not going to get the cheap opportunity. So I think this every day that goes on just reinforces the opportunity by U.S. short Canada and make yourself a lot of money. So with that, brief, but at least you can hear me.
Yeah, no, thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. And one of your key points is, the Canadian government really screwed up how they went about things. Could you elaborate that so the audience can really get a sense of that? What exactly did they do wrong in the rollout that they've done?
Well, it's just in general, the government is far too involved in every single aspect of the business. And I don't think the government's goal is the same as investors and entrepreneurs, right? So the problem is, the largest retailers in Canada are going to be the governments. So the government becomes the client. I mean, you get these licenses, which is terrific. Of course, you're in a northern climate. It's not Southern California. It's not as easy to to grow cheap cannabis. High quality cheap cannabis is better in a sunnier climate. So you've got these higher costs, and then at the provincial level, you had to build out per province. But then you've got to retail to the government. Who wants to retail to the government? I mean, come on. And then you can't build a brand. You were prevented from building a brand. Like the moment that happens, you could ask yourself, how do you even build value for investors? And so I just love the U.S. model so much more. Another perfect example, Lowell Farms, right, a public company down in the States. They just announced they're doing a licensing brand. So they're going to be making this stuff in California, but they're going to be licensing to Massachusetts and Illinois through an existing operator there. They're going to produce the brand, but it's going to be marketed like you can go nationwide theoretically today in America, build your brand by doing licensing deals. And so that's where the profit is. That's where the shareholder value is over time. And the Canadian government doesn't get a whole lot of things right. I mean, last night they just decided to spend $30 billion on building child care facilities across the country. I mean, do we really need more daycare? I'm not so sure, but $30 billion in Canada, that's the equivalent of the U.S. doing $300 billion in child care. I mean, it's government's involved far too much. Basically, they should have let the entrepreneurs run with the business, and it would have worked beautifully. Unfortunately, but you can't get everything right.
Thank you. No, appreciate that. And I'll go to Brian Sheng next, and then circle back because I think there's an interesting viewpoint for the whole panel in terms of what's happening kind of globally too. Because I'm well aware of some of the Canadian companies, not quite brands, entering places like Germany and kind of disappointing the customer there because of lack of quality product. California grows the best stuff currently, and they can't send it anywhere. So it's been an interesting kind of rollout. So Brian, I'm going to do the same here. Cue up your video, and then we'll take it from there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Sheng, and I'm the CEO and founder of Asia Horizon. Asia Horizon is a holding company focused on the emerging cannabinoids industry in China. I'm very excited to be a panelist on today's 420 Summit, and thank you to Mark, Nan, and rest of the 361 team for hosting this opportunity. Our thesis at a high level is that the cannabis legalization movement is a global movement. And following legalization in North America, South America, and into Europe, we believe that Asia is the next frontier. And as countries all over Asia start to understand the potential of the industry, they're all finding their own ways to approach legalization. Way to compare it is that China today in 2021 is very similar to what the North American industry looked like 6 to 7 years ago. And I hope in my discussions, I can help provide some insights into what's happening in the region and how investors are able to partake in the opportunity. Earlier last year, Asia Horizon has collaborated with the ArcView Group to publish the first ever CBD and hemp industry white paper for China. I hope everyone has a chance to take a look at the paper we have published to understand the scale of the opportunity that we see. In the white paper, we approached industry experts, public company CEOs, regulators, up and down the cannabis supply chain and regulatory agencies to provide a comprehensive outlook at the state of the industry today. I'm looking forward to sharing more of my insight on the industry on the panel. See you then.
Great, thank you, Brian. And not sure if you had any slides to share, but would love to get a better sense of exactly what you guys are up to in China and what you see as the opportunity there.
Sure. So I'm actually going to go off slides and just broadly talk about what's happening on the ground in China. Going a little bit deeper about Asia Horizon, like I mentioned on the intro video, we're focused on the cannabinoids industry in China. There's two parts of our business. The first part of our business is a processing business. We hold one of 16 licenses and we're the only American company to have been given a license by the Chinese government to process cannabinoids from hemp. And the second part of our business is we own our own proprietary direct-to-consumer brand called UMA, which we're launching in Hong Kong this month, as well as into China later in the month as well. So, given a little bit, actually take a step backwards, giving a little bit more about my background. Many in the 361 network, does know about my background, but I've been doing business across the United States and China for pretty much my entire career. And looking at, starting from the United States, started investing in cannabis back in 2014, I saw a lot of the parallels that are reminiscent, that are starting to play out in China today, but at a much faster pace. One of the things that I draw on from Steve Burke's talk earlier today is really the methodical approach of the Chinese government when they look at something that they see value in. And this is what has started to happen over the past 3-4 years, is that the Chinese government has put hemp into part of its national development plans, more specifically into the provincial plans at the Yunnan and Heilongjiang level, where they said, we now understand there's a potential for hemp and that we need to divide the difference between drug cannabis and industrial cannabis. I'm sure many people don't usually associate cannabis with China, but it's part of the government's plan to understand that we can actually make something useful from an industry perspective, create tax, create jobs, some of the same things that are happening in other countries around the world, the same reasons for legalization, except in this case, it's done in a way that China can accept, which is no THC. And today, I guess I want to talk about a little bit of the, we talk a lot about legalization in the West, but I think that in the Eastern region, there's a whole different way of legalization that is happening, but one that actually is actually much more practical in nature. And I think China actually has one of the most practical frameworks for legalization, in the sense that the government is very purposeful in how and why they're approaching legalization. And when we look at the menu, when we look at the processing business, our thesis is that we don't see actually cannabis as a specialized industry. We simply see it as an ingredient business or an API business. And when we look at the global supply chain for where APIs and different types of ingredients are made, they're made in China. 60 to 90% of all of those ingredients are made in China. And we see it similarly that as the global supply chain develops over the next 5 to 10 years, as global CPG companies come in and are looking for stable supplies, that's going to come from China. And the other part is also extremely obvious is there's 1.4 billion people in China that are now starting to become exposed to CBD products for the first time. There's a very specific reason where we chose Hong Kong as our first launch point, as I think is the perfect blend of East meets West, where if you go to Hong Kong today, it's like going to East Village, and being able to see that CBD shops are popping up everywhere. People want to have CBD, try CBD for the first time in a cafe shop. Maybe it's just like in East Village when the different hipster cafes started carrying CBD drops. And even actually just recently, K11, which is for those of you that are familiar with New York, it's like the Hudson Yards of Hong Kong, one of the most premier properties in Hong Kong, just opened their first CBD shop in the most prime real estate in the city. And so what we're seeing is that there are a lot of activity where, imagine a whole country that the regulatory reasons for banning CBD is starting to disappear. There's starting to be a more thought out framework. Actually, in Hong Kong, there is a, excuse me, in Hong Kong, there's a very clear import regime on what is allowed in the city, what is allowed in the country, with no CBN and no THC allowed, COA produced and checked at customs. There's very clear regulations that are starting to develop, and those are the things that we look at and say, well, this is very interesting, and there's an opportunity that's here today. Now, the processing side and the global supply chain, I think, is more of a medium-term thesis, as that needs to be built out, and the rest of the global industry also is advancing towards maturity, whether that's the European market or the North American market. But I think those two areas represent very large opportunities in the coming years, and I think this is, talking about the capital markets for a second, I think this is also especially important because in the Western world, whether you're talking about New York or Canada or even the London Stock Exchange, Western investors have had exposure to cannabis over the past, well, since the start of the legalization wave. But the entirety of Asia have pretty much not had an opportunity to participate in the growth of the industry, except perhaps in the last 3 years. And so, imagine look at the financial markets on the eastern side of the world, understand local opportunities that represent legitimate investment opportunities. I think that's something that is also that is happening now, and there are more institutional funds starting to look at consumer brands in China. I'll name a few, such as SimpCare in China. They're focused on CBD, and there's also Hong Kong brands that are focusing on CBD, such as Felix & Co., which is actually owned by Altum out of Australia. So we're seeing a lot of movements, and this is starting to prove out our thesis that we, as we started this journey about 2.5 years ago, when I was still at the ArcView Group, and we hosted the first ever cannabis conference in Hong Kong. The short 2.5 years ago, when we brought people over to Hong Kong, the day after the conference, there was a picture of us on the front page of the South China Morning Post, sort of mocking us that we were bringing illegal drugs to Hong Kong. And 2.5 years later, their CBD shops are opening everywhere. It's legal. Young, all kinds of consumers, young and old, even actually special needs groups. I've been approached by many special needs groups looking for CBD products. So these are the signs that, were some of the same reasons that convinced me to join the cannabis industry back in 2014 in the first place, when I was an early investor in Ease. And, we saw handwritten letters from some of the earliest medical patients saying how much their lives were changed, being able to access medicine for the first time through a convenient way. And I think those are some of the similarities that are really getting me excited. So that's really a quick high-level introduction on what's going on in China. But let's not forget even about other Asian markets. I think many people don't know that Japan has one of the most vibrant CBD markets in Asia today. If you can go into, you go to Roppongi and you go to some of the most luxurious downtown areas of Japan, you can find CBD products $300–400 a bottle. that are being sold in many different places. And in Japan, I think this combines with the extremely harsh and difficult, stressful work culture in Japan, that some of the benefits of CBD is something that's very attractive to the specific demographic. So these are some of the things that we're seeing in the region, and you know, I would encourage that when we look at Asia overall, you know, what if there's a whole different way of thinking about legalization, where that might be about THC, might be about the source of the plant. What does that look like? And how do we approach that today, where we see the rest of the world legalizing, and where do we plant our flags? Those are the sort of the questions we ask ourselves, and figuring out where the opportunities are.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. And so I hope from the keynote speakers, everybody gets a sense that, you know, this is happening. This is happening at a global scale at various stages, and different places are focusing on different parts of this ecosystem. You know, for example, Europe is really focused on R&D and IP, and it's early days there still, and they've got a medicinal program, but rec is going to be in the picture, I think, pretty soon in terms of what they're going to start talking about. Asia is focused on CBD and already has, you know, markets that are showing good traction. And we talked also about kind of the public side of things. There's ways to, you know, given where valuations are, there's ways to go long. There's ways to go long short. You know, policies and regulatory changes are much more, you know, they have much more traction today than they did a couple of years ago. So I'll just, in the interest of time, I don't want to be too off schedule for the other speakers in case they have to run for other things. But Mark, did you have any questions from the audience you might have seen, or any other thoughts for the panelists?
I was just thinking how great it is. I don't have to think. You get to curate everything, but then you threw me out there.
Just making sure you're still, still with us.
Well, just even the panel, you've heard the other panelists. You know, you're here for a reason. You know, what? Any reflections on what you've heard? You know, Tim, you went first. So anything that you've heard that did you learn something today, or do you disagree with something? Curious.
Well, I think the important part of almost every keynote here was rooted in the international nature of the industry that's evolving in a localized fashion. And so a lot of people ask me, hey, are you investing hard in Europe? Are you investing hard in Asia? Are you investing, you know, US versus Canada? And I think they're again, the nature of the way the industry is evolving is very global. Latin America may be the most interesting. You know, Chris talked about also North Macedonia, and you know, where economies of scale or efficiencies are going to ultimately win out in a world. We all believe that this is a. I think everybody believes they're building a brand, right? And yet, how many brand companies are there in the world that are some of the high-end brands in any sector, you know, that are fully vertically integrated? So that's just, you know, me saying I think there's enormous opportunities for investors to kind of pick their spots, and I think it's important, though, every person here has gotten into legislative and political dynamics of what they do and how they assess it and how it's critical to the decisions that they make. So I think for the folks listening in outside the industry and assessing both investment and assessing, you know, operational dynamics, you know, pick your jurisdiction and pick it right, and make sure you can, and that's both as an investor, you know, what you do, how you do it. I think those are the things that I heard today that resonated most with me.
Yeah, I would very much agree with what Tim just said there. I mean, it's a lot about understanding the dynamics of where you're looking. Like, there are opportunities everywhere. And it's really important to understand the dynamics, right, the political, regulatory, business dynamics of not only the country you're looking at, but also the region you're looking at and how that country fits into that region. right, looking a few years ahead, right, what's really hot right now may not be may not be as lucrative a couple of years from now when new markets nearby open up. I mean, even just the dynamics of the United States. There was a great article yesterday in Politico about border town dispensaries and how the town of the small town out in western Oregon is now getting 9% of their their annual tax revenue from their dispensaries, right? Because they're all serving the Boise, Idaho community. But if you look out 5 years from now, or hopefully Boise, it'll be legal there as well. And right, these stores are going to go back to being stores in a town of 10,000 people. And I think we need to look at everything sort of holistically that way as well, right? What are the opportunities today? What are the opportunities 5 years from now? It was really great to hear Brian talk about what's happening in Asia. I think that conversation is largely overlooked. And yet you're talking about, the region with literally the most people in the entire world. And I think most of the cannabis community and the cannabis business community is largely overlooking what's happening there, but there's a lot going on. I'm actually personally an investor in Asia Horizons because, I believe in the team. And I guess that's the last takeaway here is, especially when you're talking internationally. But I mean, I think it's a rule of thumb anywhere investing, right? You have to have confidence in the team that's ultimately running things, right? You might believe in the markets and the market dynamic and the opportunity. If you don't have a great team to execute it, right, you're probably not going to be successful. And then when you're talking about other places around the world, particularly smaller countries, really making sure that you've got a team that you can trust, that is well plugged in that country, that understands those dynamics, and isn't tied to their business fortunes are not tied to their connections to one politician, which we see that in some of these smaller countries, right? That would scare the heck out of me. But that this is a really trustworthy team with deep ties to that business community that is able to execute on a plan that that is otherwise sound.
Yeah, just to wrap it up, I think it's exactly what Chris has said. I would go the opposite direction and say that looking at all the opportunities in cannabis, it's incredibly localized, especially on the international front. And if you're looking at an opportunity, you probably should ask Tim or Chris for introductions to the right team. It's an incredibly small community. And, I think it's getting to become what, the 2.0 and 3.0, where there are more executives joining, but at the same time, it requires such depth of knowledge, not just within cannabis, but in broader, whether it's talking about China or Colombia or Germany, any of these markets that are opening, it just requires so much, both cross-disciplinary experience, but then also cannabis specifically. So, I think being able to understand who are the players, the right teams, that's super important.
And I think the segue Chris had about Oregon feeding Idaho might be a good segue to Dashida and her panel.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the keynote speakers. Really appreciate it, and all the insights. And so I'm going to transition over to the next panel. Apologies for the bit of a delay here, but I'm going to run this panel slightly differently. I'm going to start off with actually Dashida, so it's not going to be in order of appearance, but and feel free also as the panelists get introduced here to chime in. But what I'm going to do here is play the intro videos for Dashida, for Lori, and for Howard actually first, and then Steve, and then David Engel. And the reason for me doing that is I want to have some folks that are kind of panelists, and then others who are highlighting a specific thing they're involved with, so that we can have some great conversation around that. So I'm going to play the intro video first for Dashida and introduce her, and then we'll go from there. Let me just do that up. And as we go through these panels, by the way, feel free to start to ask your questions in the chat. And Mark, if you could help just kind of curate that and see if there's any questions coming through, I'd appreciate that. Here's
Hi.
Here's Dashida's video right now.
I'm Dashida Dawson, and I'm the Cannabis Program Supervisor for the Office of Community and Civic Life at the City of Portland in Oregon. And in this role, I oversee all of the regulatory licensing, compliance, education, and equity initiatives for the city's legal cannabis program. I'm super excited to be joining a powerhouse group of speakers for the 420 Cannabis Summit hosted by Bar Capital and 361 Firm. So just to share a little bit about myself, I'm a corporate to cannabis crossover, having led transformative business units for companies like Target and Victoria's Secret. I crossed over into the industry 5 years ago as a senior executive consultant, business strategist, and thought leader for multiple cannabis operations, municipalities, special interest groups, and media outlets. I can honestly say from seed to solution, I have seen every aspect of the cannabis industry, and it led me to actually become an author of the best-selling workbook, How to Succeed in the Cannabis Industry. But if I'm being real, I joined the industry as a cannabis patient first, and therefore I joined with a mission to legitimize and to stabilize and to diversify the legal cannabis industry. So while my work as the cannabis program supervisor is in Oregon, my cannabis equity advocacy has been global. I'm Brooklyn born, Jersey educated, so I'm most proud of the work that I've been doing on the ground in New York and New Jersey to support legalization, but my work to date and legislative testimony has impacted the legalization movement for a number of states across the country. I can honestly say that my leadership and influence is at an intersection of cannabis science, business, policy, and education. And with that in mind, I'm working on a number of public, private partnerships, including a White House supported cannabis education initiative. I'm looking forward to sharing more at the upcoming summit. I hope to see you there. But if you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Dashida Dawson, or reach out to learn more about that White House supported initiative through the 361 app. I'll see you there.
Great, thank you for that intro, Dashida. And so the theme for this panel really is why we're at version 3.0, as Tim had mentioned, in the cannabis industry. It takes time, it takes experience, it takes folks coming in from other industries that develop it. And so I'll let Dashida go next and kind of just talk from the perspective of what that private to public transition is like, and what the city of Portland as a environment is like on the cannabis front. And then I'll kind of transition into Lori and the other panelists, and I'll end with David, who's more experienced on and directly experienced on the cultivation side, because I want to show kind of the different levels of evolution of how experience builds in this industry, and advocacy and all the angles that are involved, and consulting and getting businesses up to the right level to excel in the space. So please go ahead, Dashida, and kind of tell us more about your involvement with the city of Portland in particular, because we've got a federal sense from Chris, especially earlier. Would love to know what the local sense is on how cannabis is treated.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. There's been a lot of local and state communication at the federal level. So what we do know at the local and state level, we're setting the precedent. And part of the reason why I transitioned into the industry is really about changing the laws. And after I started working with a number of municipalities as a consultant, I realized that I wanted to transition into a government role so that I could actually test some of my assumptions, things that I think a lot of analysts are debating about as far as the industry is concerned, and seeing what happens in the implementation stage. Because oftentimes the laws are written and they may mean well, some may not, but oftentimes they're not always implemented as expected. I wanted to highlight, and some of the previous speakers spoke about this, some of the big topics that are changing the business landscape and therefore the investment landscape as we think about it from a policy and regulation perspective. Obviously, we all know about the Safe Banking Act, so I won't belabor that. It is something that our state representative Blumenauer, we've been seeing the impact of a cash heavy business in Portland with a lot of crime associated with the protests and between just generally being high risk and then unusual times that we've been under with COVID and protests, it's been more acute. And so we see the risk that happens as a result of not having cash access. And this is operational risk, but also investment risk risk as a result. But another area that we've been talking about really intentionally in Oregon is about the lack of sense around the trifurcated regulatory system. And so it was great to hear Brian talk about the impact of hemp, the impact of CBD, because hemp is cannabis too. I have a degree in molecular biology, so it's been really interesting to see how the government has trifurcated hemp government and regulation, medical cannabis government and regulation, and adult use. And in Oregon, we've been definitely talking about how to bring that all under one office. And New York is sort of setting a precedent because its Office of Cannabis Management is the first regulatory framework that actually does house all three, putting hemp cannabinoids specifically in that same framework. So what that means is that whereas in the past we were very, very separated from what you were doing maybe on the high THC or marijuana side, from what you're doing in the hemp side, when we say that you need to think about it in a whole plant perspective in terms of the policies coming down the pipe, I definitely think that that's something worthwhile. And a lot of the brands in the space are starting to really do exactly that. You can create a national brand using hemp-based CBD, but be located in high THC legalized markets, medical or adult use, and extend your brands to have THC infused products. So we're already seeing that happen across the country, but I definitely think New York set a precedent on this idea of why are we regulating them all separately. There's also the importance of the legacy market. So Oregon is one of the open markets. It isn't a forced competition where you have to buy into the market. Some folks have some debate about whether or not that has made the market not as viable as far as investment. I happen to believe it grows the best flower in the country, having visited all of the legal markets. But I definitely think that in the space of Oregon, what we learned is that equity and in the legacy market are kind of going hand in hand in some way, but we've also missed out in the legal market. You're not going to see a multi-billion-dollar existing economy of supply and demand disappear or completely be eradicated without some sort of acknowledgement and integration of it. So I definitely am one of the forefront thought leaders about this idea of really understanding legacy market dynamics as you are investing, and don't assume that just because it's weed, right? A lot of people believe that it's going to sell. We're seeing a lot of MSOs struggle with that, especially since it tends to also be the crux of why there isn't necessarily enough equity in the industry. The other fourth thing that I will call out is that cannabis is inherently medicinal. And so in the statute within Oregon, cannabis is supposed to be treated like medicine, but it isn't in so many ways. And I think that that is the mistake of a lot of markets when they're rushing into adult use. We see that that transition isn't always as expected, and most of the revenue expectation for the state or the local level is below the bar. Some states have really messed it up in terms of Washington losing it completely, and some like New York are recognizing that they need to expand the medical market. If you're not penetrating enough of the people who are literally going to the doctor right now for the ailments that can be resolved with cannabis, then the idea of being able to roll out a successful adult use market is a lot further ahead. Really recognizing as an investor that it's inherently medicinal. There are multiple pharmaceutical drugs and markets that this will disrupt, and that will always be the case, whether it's an adult use market or whether it's a medical regulatory structure. The government and the legislation does not dictate the use, the consumer does. Last thing I'll end with is education. We're also seeing a bit of a dearth in the pipeline, right? Like we have these people who are like myself, corporate to cannabis crossover. I happen to be a patient. So I also have a little bit more knowledge, and I'm like a biologist. It means that I'm bringing science-based, but I do think that we don't have this pipeline coming from the youth that are really understanding cannabis is different. And so the sustainability of the industry is always being questioned at the government level. people. Are we educating people enough? The answer is no. And so I'll end with the Cannabis Health Equity Movement, or CHEM, has launched a first White House supported National Cannabis Education Initiative. And this is intended to be public-private partnership to do so. We have a lot of big companies, and I think it's okay to think that we're going to have corporate sector crossover. There's still an education gap, and then how do we fill in on the back end? Cannabis has such impact across multiple disciplines, and so our goal with the Global Campus is that we can partner with municipalities at the local level, as well as HBCUs, minority serving institutions, tribal institutions, college and state and community colleges, in order for us to really educate and fill in the gap on the pipeline. I think that that's something that the United States is looking at, and I'm not sure that we're as caught up as places like Israel and Germany, but I think that right now we're starting to see the discussion, at least around hemp, because again, hemp competency is cannabis competency. I'll end there. I hope that that has been helpful in some of the insights from the regulatory perspective.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Appreciate that. Your video and that was very, very educational for all of us. And thank you for your work in New Jersey. Mark and I are both residents and appreciate your efforts. So I'm gonna share Lori Kibbe's video next, and then we're gonna circle back towards the end. But I'll cue up the video here, and then we'll turn it over to Lori.
Hi, this is Lori Kibbe, the CFO and co-founder of King's Garden, one of the largest cannabis indoor cultivation companies in the state of California, and also the co-founder and board chair for Entourage, a Colorado-based company that is committed to making clinical grade products from hemp. King's Garden, most importantly, I think, is what everyone's interested in, or at least in the cannabis business. My expertise in the past is in real estate development, and having been now in the cannabis business for the last 6 years, we've grown our company from zero revenue to just over 100 million last year, and on our target to do 300 million by 2023. I am, I think, probably become an expert, or at least close as an expert can be, in understanding what companies will make it, what companies won't, what are the key things to look for when making an investment in the cannabis space, and understanding how to evaluate companies where they are in their growth cycle. My contact information is Lori, L-A-U-R-I, at kingsgardeninc.com. And I look forward to speaking with all of you on Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori, for the intro video. And so I'll pose this question so our audience can understand better. You were part of something from inception to now, where where things are, and especially from the perspective, and it's great to get diverse representation here from the industry. But could you talk through some of the key challenges, being based in California, from those early days to where you're at now, and your role in that growth?
Certainly, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. King's Garden actually started as 11 separate companies because we initially were formed, or our different companies were formed during the medical collective regulatory environment. So we operated as cultivators for various collectives. When recreational was passed, we ended up merging all of those 11 companies and our investors into the one company, the predecessor to King's Garden Inc. And at the same time, we did our last raise. We did a friends and family round in that merger. So 11 companies went into one, King's Garden LLC, and then became King's Garden Inc. I think that the most important aspect of that is we feel like we're very nimble in responding to regulatory change here in California. We have about 200 investors, so we manage them as well. We've always raised privately. We haven't had to raise any funds since 2018 because we're cash flow positive and also profitable. I guess the two go together, not always, but in our case they do. I've listened to many of the speakers and I appreciate all of the insights. A couple of the things that we have learned, or we believe matter. King's Garden is an indoor cultivator, and our focus is building a brand. Cannabis is a product, but really the most important thing is a brand. We're in the middle of licensing in various states across the United States. And we believe the California market speaks to the sophistication and the ultimate sophistication of all cannabis users. And from that perspective, we focus on quality. My overall experience is in looking at what's happening in California is that everyone thinks they can grow cannabis, but growing really quality cannabis is very, very difficult. And to do it on a mass scale, on a consistent scale, is even more difficult. And so coming up with the procedures and the processes for doing so is critical to a long-term success. And then building around that quality, your brand becomes very, very important. I think that the consumer is underestimated in their level of sophistication. And I've heard kind of different views on it this morning. Here in California, we believe the consumer does know the difference. And it's not just how it smells, how it looks, and the content of it. All three of those become important. It's not just the high, it's the type of high even. And then from a medical perspective, the content becomes very important as well. What is the content of the cannabinoids, not just the THC? And then finally, I think understanding really the infrastructure costs and coming up, which is supported in your systems of growth. We are counter MSO. We had an opportunity to participate in kind of the expansion across the United States and chose not to. We felt that we would be better served in building a brand locally, building a large market acceptance, and then building off of that by partnering with the infrastructure in other states. We've always believed that legalization is coming, and it was a matter of timing. And so being prepared for that by having a strong, profitable company with a strong brand identity was the way to be prepared, not to be in every state and use hundreds of millions of dollars to build that infrastructure. Just as an understanding, we've been able to build our entire company on only $55 million of equity. So we last year, as I mentioned, did 100 million or just under 100 million of revenue, and we have a 29% EBITDA. So that's just speaking to how well we believe we've done. I'm also involved in a hemp-based business that's doing clinical grade formulations. And again, we believe that the hemp market's been the consumer is going to get smarter, and the quality of hemp that's out there, the isolate, we believe is something that is going to go away, and people are going to understand the power of whole flower. I think it's the same with the cannabis market. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I hope that's.
Thank you. Yeah, and I thank Jen Bassick for referring you and including you in the panel. And so I'll turn it over to Jen. I think she had a question actually.
Yeah, actually, I saw a question in the chat that's now sparking a lot of conversation. So, Lori, if the critical farming is in California, what are the opportunities or the barriers to farming in the former tobacco company? You had answered in the chat while you were talking, several people started weighing in. So I thought maybe this is something you could elaborate on for the group.
Well, I mean, cannabis plant is a soil cleaner. You know, it will absorb whatever's in the soil. And so what we've observed in growing is that if you have ground full of pesticides, your plant will, absorb. It's a great soil cleaner. So tobacco farming, my understanding, and I am by no means understand tobacco farming, but I can't imagine they didn't use pesticides. So you have to understand what's in the soil and what's going to be in your cannabis plant when it's harvested after having grown in that soil. And I think that it can take a couple of years for it to clean out that soil, which would be amazing. But when you think about the after product, the end product, you want to make sure it's clean, it's consumer safe. And that is going to be a difficult achievement, something difficult to achieve if you're growing it in highly pesticide soils. So.
Thank you, Lori. Really appreciate your thoughts and insights. I'm going to stick to the cultivation piece actually and move along to David Engel next. Who's in a similar space, and I'll run the video as we've been doing, and then circle back to David. 1 second here.
My name is David Engel. I'm Managing Director of Full Moon Investments. Website www.fullmooninvestments.com. My email is david@fullmooninvestments.com, and my telephone number, direct dial cell, is 404-993-7077. We've been implementing on the cannabis space again since 2013. Our staff is highly experienced, dating back to the early days of Oregon cannabis in 2002 and 2006, our cultivation and laboratory processing staff. So, you know, what we like to say is we're highly experienced, and experience to us is having screwed stuff up. Okay, we've screwed everything you can screw up at least once, but we do keep a list of those screw ups and we don't do them again. And so that's what in the cannabis space, I believe, defines experience is mistakes. We are presently implementing in Massachusetts on an active investment, a very good market there. And then we also are implementing on our licenses that we were awarded in Spain and Malta. We're very excited about the European market with 740 addressable population and fast convergence to medical and recreational cannabis in the next several years. We expect our planting date with our cannabis in our 1.6 million square feet glass greenhouse facilities that we bought last summer. We expect to plant in May of 2021, next month, and are very excited to tell you guys about that. Thank you for the time today and listening to the recording and also the presentation. Thank you very much.
David, if you're there, yeah, I know you've got some slides here that I'll queue up, but please elaborate a little bit more, because we were talking about Europe earlier. So please elaborate more on what you're doing there in particular and what you see as the opportunity. You're on mute right now, David. There we go.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anand. Would you like to play the videos first? Or?
Sure. Let me cue that up while you kind of talk through how you got involved in the Spain part.
Yeah, so I fell into the cannabis space in 2013 in Washington, D.C. I was in some gentleman's office, and they said, "Hey, we want you to help us with other business." I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Medical cannabis," or they call it marijuana back then, or pot. And he's setting a bit. I'm going to play the video. This is a facility we just bought last summer in Spain from the bankruptcy court.
I'll pause there so people have a sense of that one.
Yeah. So what we did was we found out about a troubled rose company just north of Madrid in Soria, Spain, called Alea Roses. Those roses they were growing and we grew for some time are actually the finest rose cultivar in the world. Long and short of it. Sort of good idea, bad execution and plan, bad marketing, and that company, invested over $100 million between those facilities and starting that company, and find themselves way into bankruptcy court. So we found out about it. The bankruptcy court was auctioning, holding a sealed bid auction for buying those facilities that you just saw, which is.
And David, so if you could focus on the cannabis part, what exactly are you folks doing there, and kind of what is your expertise on cultivating?
Sure. So, we've been doing cannabis for school, made a lot of mistakes, and we just cross them off, don't make them twice. We acquired these facilities. We applied for cannabis licensure in Spain against all odds, I guess, as I look back. I didn't realize how long shot it was. We were awarded the license or the authorization to plant. We have converted those facilities to cannabis facilities, and we are in the final stages of getting inspected by the medical agency in Spain, and we intend to plant our cannabis, our first crops in May next month, as soon as they inspect us. We invited them out last Thursday, and they're going to show up any day now to inspect us. Once they inspect us, check our security, they're going to allow us to plant. So we're going to be planting in those facilities for medical cannabis.
What are some of the challenges you've had in the cultivation part? And perhaps it's not specific to Europe, but interested in kind of, you've been doing this for some time, interested in some of the issues you've had as you've tried to scale up cultivation operations.
Well, there's about 1,000 things that could go wrong in the cultivation of cannabis. We've eliminated about 900 of them that we found. But anything from not having the proper facilities, equipment, environmental controls, not equipping things properly. We might have humidity problems and mold, or, as the previous speaker said, pesticides in our product, or not pesticides, contaminants in our product. Things like that, that sort of, if you don't start at this thing right with your facilities and your upfit, a lot of people try to, go on a shoestring budget and not get the proper facilities, proper controls. Cannabis is, especially indoor growing or even greenhouse growing, it's about controlling your environmental conditions, controlling your medium you're growing in, and all the fertigation, irrigation, the water system, the whole soup to nuts, because ultimately it does go in the product, as your previous speaker said. So we've just learned that you got to do it right, and we're doing it right at these facilities in Spain. We've invested a lot of money in certain types of equipment to adjust those facilities. For example, dehumidification equipment, blackout shades, and then also a lot of post-harvest equipment that we've invested good money on to do it right. So we're fast coming online in Spain, and we're also concurrently developing and building out our laboratory facilities in Malta, where we will ship from Spain, import to Malta to laboratory process to finish medical cannabis products, including finishing the flower in Malta to manicured bud. And our marketing plan is to distribute throughout the EU and medical cannabis programs, which we see sort of along the lines are developing very rapidly into rec markets. Germany's expected to possibly come online with rec this year. The UK has a medical program now, Ireland, Scotland, Switzerland, Israel, Italy. These are all programs that are sort of gravitating, as we did in the States early on, where they allow certain conditions or certain concentrations of THC for limited conditions, and they start expanding. It just starts loosening up, and then there's talk of legalization. The French president just came out and said that he wants to legalize cannabis in France, for example. So we're seeing that gravitational, pull towards legalization, both medical initially, but then pretty quickly move into recreational cannabis. And it's just like, think about Germany for a minute. We talk about California. We got 40 million people in California. Well, there's 83 million people in Germany. So it's a population, it's addressable market. If that goes rec, we got 2 Californias, right, in one country. And so the countries, because of the federal law being one law and not having these conflicting things with the states, we think the gravitational pull towards medical and then recreational is going to happen much faster in Europe, and we think it's faster than most people realize at this point.
Thank you, David. In the interest of time, I got to keep things going because we're one panel behind in timing, but appreciate that view on Europe. And I'm gonna just go with the video.
I would just say, oh, you're gonna go with what video? I'm
sorry, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I encourage people to reach out to me. The contact information's on the video. If you have an interest in participating with us, we think we have one of the best things going right now. As far as facilities, those are, you know, $68 million US facilities, brand new. They're only 4 years old. You know, we've got a jump start on that, and we got the proper licensure, proper setup. We're in it to make money and to get to revenues quick. That's what our game is. We expedite things and get cannabis licenses moving and to revenues quickly. That's our special set. We're expediters. Go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Next up here, we've got Steve Kemmerling from CRB Monitor. I'm going to play the video and do the same format.
Hello, my name is Steve Kemmerling. I am the founder and CEO of CRB Monitor. You can email me at steve@crbmonitor.com or visit our website, crbmonitor.com, to learn more or email me directly. As a former investment banker, I wanted to build the Capital IQ or SNL Financial covering the cannabis industry. So I founded CRB Monitor in 2014. Since then, I've developed the largest, most comprehensive database of generally private, direct cannabis-related businesses, including their licensing, ownership, and location information of those CRBs in the US and Canada. Today, our database has over 45,000 direct cannabis-related businesses, 72,000 owners, and over 100,000 licenses. Additionally, we've developed the largest database of publicly traded CRBs that goes well beyond the standard list of 30 or 40 publicly traded companies. Today, this data set includes over 1,300 unique issuers and over 1,500 unique issuances globally. Generally, our clients are financial institutions, banks, credit unions, broker-dealers, and custodian banks who use our data to understand, identify, manage cannabis-related opportunities and risk. They use our data to diligence and monitor known cannabis-related relationships. More recently, we've been showing capital providers, including investors and investment bankers, how they can utilize our data to identify potential investment opportunities. Lastly, we're developing a cannabis lending platform to facilitate more normalized, standardized commercial lending to CRBs. As an existing established vendor to banks and credit unions, our platform helps both the banks and the CRBs to decrease speed, time, and risk to cannabis-related lending. Again, you can visit our website, crbmonitor.com, or email me directly at steve@crbmonitor.com to learn more. Thank you.
Great, Steve. I'm going to queue up Howard next as well in his video, but real quick to you, in terms of looking at the market as you have for the last several years, what have you seen in terms of data trends? You know, the licensure, the expansion of operations in new geographies. Could you comment a little bit more on how your data set has been expanding on that front?
Yeah, and thanks for letting me post that riveting video of myself. so sorry everyone had to watch that right off the script. You know, I've been running CRB Monitor since 2014. So I mean, it pretty much goes without saying. I think back then there was, I don't know, 8 or 9 states, 5,000 direct. And I am going to use the word marijuana related businesses because my banks care about marijuana versus hemp versus CBD, but the stuff with THC. So we're about 45,000, you know, of those entities now. So it's just, you know, over 100,000 licenses for the businesses and the owners. So it's not insignificant, and that's just US and Canada. So obviously we're always tracking new states. I was just updating my map for, you know, Georgia and North Dakota, South Dakota, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, it goes without saying, there's just a plethora of data to manage and track and hopefully package in a way that's useful for institutional users.
Thank you. And I apologize, since we're running late, I'm going to go to the next video and then open it up for a question for both you and Howard, so we can make up on a little bit of time here. Let me just queue up Howard Schachter here, and I'll play the video.
Hey there, I'm Howard Schachter. I'm a corporate communications executive who specializes in helping well-funded companies build and amplify compelling and differentiating narratives for the sake of investors, regulators, employees, media, and all other stakeholders. Most recently, I've spent the past couple of years in the cannabis space, leading the role of communications for leading multi-state operator Acreage Holdings. Prior, I worked with similarly positioned companies in CPG, retail, advertising, marketing, sports, and entertainment, including Facebook, McDonald's, Spotify, Live Nation, and others. I'm thrilled to be participating in the Cannabis Summit. Look forward to meeting everybody. And if you'd like to reach out to me, please do so on LinkedIn at Howard Schachter or at howardschachter@gmail.com. Thanks so much. Looking forward to the summit.
Thank you, Howard. And if you could talk about communications, you're especially, what do younger cannabis companies miss on that front versus more developed companies? And kind of how do you advise younger companies on that front of communicating?
Boy, that is a terrific question. And first off, thanks for having me, and happy 420 day to everybody. I don't think anybody recognized the milestone of the day yet. So what do I advise? Well, communications is a very broad term. And what I find in talking to entrepreneurs, CEOs every day, or investors thinking about investing in them, is really crystallizing what does communications mean. And it's not just about the press release that announces an offering or a close or a product introduction. It's a lot more than that. And thinking about the full spectrum of what communications is supposed to truly mean as a thread throughout an organization, internally and externally, is really critical. That is not generally thought about as early in the lifespan of a company as it should be. I'm going to put up on my screen, I hope I can handle this from a technology perspective. I wanted to put up on the screen what I actually mean here. Can everybody see that? Or are you looking at my?
Yep.
Yep. You still have the PowerPoint?
Yeah, now we can see the PowerPoint.
Yeah, so very, very briefly, when we think about communications in cannabis, but truly any organization that is going public or is public, growing by leaps and bounds, and generally is consumer facing, when we think about communications, it's these two sides of the spectrum. There's corp comm, which is really about corporate reputation, which is about developing the compelling story that will make sense with some fine tuning for each of the stakeholders across investors, media, regulators, and so importantly, employees, so that every single employee from receptionist on up to the C-suite can talk about, we're going to the moon, sir, as the janitor at NASA told President Kennedy a couple of decades ago. But it's also internal comms. It's how to integrate an acquisition or a plug and play capability into a company so everybody is fully aligned on the story. It's about crisis and God forbid moments at the national or local level. It's about using earned media to tell your story, be it top tier business or trade media. It's strong partnership with other functional heads, government affairs, investor relations, HR, to ensure that the story is consistent across the organization. It's using top level C-suiters and functional heads for thought leadership that'll have a halo effect down to the organization. And it's also management and assimilation of message across corporate channels and social channels and the website. That is very different than the other side of the equation, brand marketing PR, which collaborates with marketing on getting consumers and or patients into the funnel and keeping them there time and again, satisfied and happy. And you do that through effectively launching products, dispensary or other facility openings, how to leverage a sponsorship in the right compelling way, building news events from scratch that the media will pay attention to, focused on consumer media that your consumers care about, building the toolbox for facilities at the local level. So they've got plug and play templates and such to generate their own press if they need to. And then of course, as I said, it's joining at the hip with CMO and the marketing team. Too often, younger companies will go short shrift on the spend here and either hire a manager who specializes in brand marketing and thinking they can do the other side, or corporate and thinking they can do the other side, and neither gets done particularly well. So if there's one message I can bring to those folks that are running businesses is elevate your thinking about communications, and to investors of those businesses, ask questions about how the companies are thinking about comms, and you'll get a strong sense of their savviness about delivery of their message to the right audiences.
Thank you, Howard. Appreciate that. In the interest of time, and because Mark is messaging me, I got to speed things up here because we're a little behind. I'm going to run the videos for all the next panelists, and then we'll circle back with specific questions to those panelists and open up for discussion. But I appreciate the last panel and all the perspectives you've provided. And I'm going to start queuing up the videos now for the next set, starting with Maddox Svensson from L2V Capital.
Notice how he threw me under the bus there. Really, really good.
Well, I was hoping you'd stepped away to take a break or something. So let me play this clip now.
My name is Maddox Svensson. I'm the founder and general partner of L2 Ventures. We focus on investments in high growth companies within the cannabis industry, primarily in the technology and infrastructure verticals, as well as branded consumer products companies. Our current portfolio includes LeafLink, the country's largest B2B marketplace that connects nearly 6,000 retail cannabis dispensaries with nearly 2,000 cannabis branded products companies, and facilitates north of 40% of total wholesale cannabis commerce in the country. Our second portfolio company is Caliper Foods. Caliper Foods makes cannabinoid formulations for food and beverage, and they have a popular consumer brand called Caliper CBD, which is a water-soluble THC powder that has 5 to 10x the absorption of traditional formats such as oil-soluble or oil tinctures. Fourth portfolio company is Stillwater Brands. This is a sister company to Caliper Foods, which operates a similar business in the THC vertical. Over the next 12 to 24 months. Our third portfolio company is Celebre. Celebre is a company that focuses on building technology to produce cannabinoids, CBD, THC, CBG, and others via biosynthesis and fermentation. If anyone has any interest in learning more about L2V, I'd be happy to connect.
Thank you, Maddox. I'm going to queue up next the video for Kevin, if I can. There we go. Kevin O'Brien from Marsh.
My name is Kevin O'Brien. I work with Marsh & McLennan. I
I think the audio on that's a little hard to hear. So I'm gonna let Kevin speak for himself and give the intro. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin O'Brien with Marsh, based in Portland, Oregon. I run the U.S. cannabis practice here, the early parts of the U.S. cannabis practice at Marsh. I work with startups through MSOs, and we help on risk management and kind of insurance initiatives. Obviously, it's a very tight market, so we try to leverage our kind of scale and breadth as Marsh is a global organization to try to help in the evolution and efficiency of the insurance marketplace. And given the nature of the business and my connection here, I do a lot of kind of connecting on the capital side as well. So I'll pause there.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. I'm going to keep going with the intro parts, and then I'll open it up for a question at the end.
Hello, all. My name is Matt Barron, and I'm the co-founder and managing partner of 1212 Ventures. We are exclusively focused on the cannabis space and believe that brands carry the greatest opportunity to deliver long-term shareholder value. We maintain a strategic partnership with a specific cannabis company called Cookies, a leading international cannabis brand. Our fund invests exclusively in Cookies, as well as brands, businesses, and technologies that are accretive to Cookies. We believe that our unique relationship with Cookies offers our investors a competitive advantage, and look forward to learning more about you all and seeing if there's ways to work together best.
Thank you, Matt, for that intro video. And then Shanita, I don't think you had a chance to send us the video, but if I see you're on the line, so if you don't mind giving a quick intro to yourself and your background.
Sure thing. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy 420. My name is Shanita Penny. My background is in supply chain management, IT project management. I got into the space to support entrepreneurs going through the licensing process. I quickly got involved in policy advisory and advocacy. I led the Minority Cannabis Business Association for over 2 years and testified before Congress as it relates to the role of small business in the cannabis industry. So today, what I am doing is continuing to support small businesses, our MSOs, as well as municipalities and state governments that are either creating or improving our state programs. I am also supporting a recently launched coalition to inform federal policy. Our coalition is made up of non-cannabis corporate entities, Brinks, Constellation Brands, Altria. We are looking to really get the best perspectives and varied perspectives as we really push the ball downfield in a final push for legalization, if not this year, in the next 2 to 3. So excited to be here having this conversation. And if you are looking to get in contact with me, please find me on LinkedIn or at www.buddingsolutions.net.
Thank you, Shanita, appreciate it. And so I'll open this up to the panel to kind of take a look at, and this is a topic that kind of connects most of the backgrounds, but in terms of, and I'll start with Maddox actually, in terms of what's happening in the cannabis tech space, could you just give a quick overview of how you think things have changed over the last, couple of years or so? And then I'd like any other panelists to comment on what they've seen in terms of development. We haven't really touched on cannabis tech, and so in the tech and picks and shovels piece, would love to tie in these panelists on what you're kind of seeing developing in cannabis tech and how that's impacting the industry.
Maybe just add, and where you see it going, short term, long term.
And you're on mute, Maddox.
All right, there we go. Well, thank you guys for having me. Happy to share some thoughts. The size of the cannabis technology universe is quite large, so I'll try to simplify it as best I can. In terms of kind of where we were, call it 4 or 5 years ago, you had a lot of more inefficiency in the marketplace than you did today. You had a dearth of technology companies that could serve the industry. And so you saw, the emergence of companies that were solving pain points that weren't really pain points in traditional industries, but given, the illegality of this industry, you saw companies popping up that, helped with payments, helped with supply chain efficiency, helped kind of, solve a specific pain point within a specific part of the value chain. Ultimately, we've come a long way over the last 3 or 4 years where we're starting to see consolidation across the technology landscape in the form of, larger platform type businesses. Some of the names that you guys are probably familiar with, Weedmaps, which, went public via SPAC, LeafLink's another kind of scale platform, Dutchy, Jane on the e-commerce and ordering side. Leafly is another one that has, a long, 10-year history of providing information to the marketplace. But I think what you're starting to see is the precursor to consolidation around this space, where you had a lot of companies that were solving specific pain points at a point in time that, in some ways were more product and feature driven. And, in an environment or in a world where some traditional technology companies are able to serve this industry, there's real obsolescence risk. And so I think in terms of where kind of the power accrues, and this isn't dissimilar to what we see in traditional tech, is market power, market concentration around a fewer number of larger platforms that kind of subsume some of the smaller players over the next 2 to 3 years that do very well at solving a specific pain point, but as a standalone business probably don't have as much breadth to be able to build a substantial business around it. That's kind of where I think things are today.
Thank you. And to the other panelists, how are you kind of seeing evolution in your focus area? So for example, Matt, as you guys are closely, your fund is tied into cookies. How has that shifted in the last couple of years? I'm not sure when you launched the fund, but what are some of the areas of focus that you guys are looking at?
Our predecessor fund, invested 25 million across 10 companies. The biggest position was cookies, and as cookies moved into 2019, the mantra was to catch revenues up to reputation, and we saw cookies just take off. Right, we saw cookies take off. Just explosive growth, differentiated business model, unique retail presence and growth strategy on that front. We also saw cookies with a gravitational pull that we thought was really unique within the industry, both from other brands that were wanting to get into this ecosystem, but also just ancillary technologies that were just simply buoyed by cookies' rapid growth into new markets, right? So as cookies moves into new markets, it doesn't own any of its supply chain, right? It partners with best-in-class operators at each inflection point. And inherent in that model are mutually beneficial partnerships and relationships, and a dependency on best operators and unique technologies that run the entire gamut of the supply chain. What we ultimately concluded was that there was a fund worth of opportunities with cookies and brands, businesses, and technologies that were cookies accretive. And that was the genesis of 1212 in our fund. And we started it last year. 2/3 of our capital raised have gone into cookies itself. We've made 2 other investments outside of that. But we are more bullish than ever on our brands oriented thesis, right? As legislative developments happen, as they did yesterday, we think that walls will fall down, not completely and totally free market, probably look a bit more like booze, where there are restrictions on a state-by-state basis. But we think that brands carry the greatest opportunity for defensibility in the future. We think that they're less dependent on, they're more resistant to price suppression, margin suppression, as these entities expand, and that's where we're concentrating capital. We think that communities of passionate followers will dictate who does well and who performs, and to date, we haven't seen an entity that comes anywhere close to cookies in terms of creating opportunities for investments.
And then Kevin, would love to hear your perspective, because you're coming from the insurance angle, and particularly as companies evolve and are about to go the public route, and their needs are changing. Could you kind of describe where your focus is in the cannabis space? And you may be on mute.
Absolutely. Thanks. I guess the insurance piece can be viewed as a little bit less than exciting to some people, but it's a real problem point in the cannabis ecosystem, as most of you probably know. I would definitely echo what Maddox said in terms of like the consolidation, the obsolescence of this part of the industry and in some of the technology side. I just talked to a startup last week, had a really cool payments platform, and it was kind of like, well, are they going to be around in a year? Who knows? So I think we're going to see a lot of change in this part of the industry as the needs evolve and what government regulations kind of shift that set of needs. But from like the perspective of insurance, I mean, we obviously are, Marsh is a global organization. We've got 120 countries and a multi-billion-dollar organization. So we have a lot of resources we can throw at this, and we are kind of in the early innings of doing that because this is, an area of the market that requires reform. Safe Banking Claim Act will obviously be a great, lead into having more insurance capital show up in the marketplace. And I think that's going to take time even after, something like that passes. But bring it back to the relevance to this, pick and shovel type of, business here. That's a good entry point for a lot of insurers, kind of to take the crawl before they walk type of, risk tolerance level, because, you have a lot of, every insurance company knows that, the cannabis industry is evolving, and there's, needs, and there's money to be made, and there's, insurance to be provided, but a lot of them are very, restricted by, their organizations. And I think as you see regulatory, environments shift, in favor of the industry and the evolution of the industry, you'll see that that will be the first place where, large insurers will come in and be able to participate, because, there's a distinction between, there's some implied risk in the marketplace that non-plant touching business is less risky than, less risky than a plant touching business. I, theoretically disagree with that. I think the risk is equal with either business, because you're kind of can't get a little bit pregnant type of thing. But I think it will be where, and it currently is where, some marginal players are participating as a way to kind of enter into the market without feeling that they're directly exposed to like a cultivation facility or something like, or a large, inventory issue at like a dispensary or a warehouse or something like that. So, I think that's kind of where I see, it connecting to this panel, but, there is an incredible amount of work to be done, and, a lot of changes to be made, because by and large, most of the insurance marketplace is not even participating in cannabis at this point. So there's a lot more to come.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Kevin. That's perfect transition. Shanita, I know you've got a varied background and you've been involved with quite a few areas in your experience, but could you talk about some of the lobbying efforts that are taking place in the cannabis space and some of the other industry participants that are crossing over and supporting cannabis lobbying?
Sure thing. I mean, to your point, a lot of times the picks and shovels are the entry points into the market that don't require the highly regulated and competitive licenses, right? And if you're in a state like Maryland, where in 2015, the opportunity was only there for, 12 cultivators, 15 cultivators. Pennsylvania, it was 25. But if you are, someone who's providing lighting, someone who's able to do HVAC, any of those things that support the 25 licensed businesses, you have an opportunity that's a lot more realistic than getting into the plant touching side of the business. As it relates to our lobbying and the work and progress that we're able to make, a lot of times our ancillary businesses are seeing the benefits of our legalization efforts in a real way before the plant touching businesses. So last year, in response to the pandemic, you had, the SBA, you had the SBA language, you had the safe banking language that was all added to COVID relief packages. And so you had this language that was rolled up into something that was, it didn't pass the Senate, but it passed the House, and these businesses would have had access to PPP loans, for instance. A year ago, or 2019, when I testified before Congress, I was calling out the fact that we've got cultivators in Oregon who have paid, $500,000 in, city, state, federal taxes over the years, who could not, because they didn't have great insurance, didn't have access to SBA or these PPP relief programs, that had to either go out of business, and some were even using GoFundMe as a fundraising tool to, rebuild their businesses in response to, wildfires, or in response to being, there was also a huge, there was so much civil unrest last year that the cannabis industry was actually infected. You had dispensaries that were looted. And so while some of them have, insurance that took care of this, there were a lot more, especially in places like Oakland, who were left hanging, especially in places like that I know of, like Oregon. So it's important for, all of the professional services that are necessary to support the industry, that you find, what it is that's kind of like your lane, and find a way to support the industry. It creates a new revenue stream for your business. And there are huge opportunities in terms of the growth of this industry as it relates to other sectors that may not be growing as fast. So I think it's wildly smart to get in where you fit in and then pivot or grow. And I think that it's always important that we are advocates for what we want the regulatory and policy to look like for this industry.
Thank you for that perspective.
I feel like we should have a lobbying breakout.
Yeah, no, it should have its own breakout. And you know, I just wanted to note also, we are kind of on a monthly pace right now, and we do deep dives into specific areas. This is a big summit, so it's got multiple panels, but we, you know, try to have specific panels. So there'll be plenty of future opportunities for the audience as well as the speakers to kind of do a deeper dive in some of these areas. I'm going to go ahead and queue up the next panel. Appreciate this panel, and there'll be more talk in the breakouts on this important picks and shovels and tech side. So I'm going to queue up the next video here for Ben Langley and Grow. I'll open it up right after this.
Hi, my name is Ben Langley. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Grow Group PLC. Grow Group is a medical cannabis company. We're a European leader in medical cannabis based out of the UK. I fundamentally believe as an investor, as an entrepreneur, there are hundreds of millions of patients globally who could and should benefit from cannabis medicines. And ultimately only a small portion of those people are actually getting that medicine that would ultimately improve their lives in a legal context. So this is a dynamic that we as Grow seek to solve. So our mission is to get quality cannabis medicines to the patients that need them. And we're doing a fairly good job of that in the UK and Ireland so far. We're leaders in the UK and Ireland, which are growing very exciting markets. And we're just expanding into continental Europe currently from a distribution perspective. So very excited about what we have ahead. I'm looking forward to talking about it tomorrow with the panel. 361 always run excellent events, 420 a big day in the industry. So very much looking forward to sharing the story of Grow. My story, I'm an ex-banker, ex-JP Morgan, spent 12 years as an investment banker there, and now dedicated completely to cannabis, clearly. So looking forward to talking about that, and looking forward to meeting everyone. Anyone that sort of wants to reach out in the meantime or after, please do get in touch. Best email for me is ben.langley@growbiotech.com. That's ben.langley@growbiotech.com. So again, looking forward to speaking with folks and looking forward to the panel tomorrow. Thank you very much.
And so now we're in the downstream part, and we're talking about the consumer touching, the patient touching part of the cannabis eco chain, and then companies actually that tie into that part that might be kind of tech enabled. So Ben, as I queue up the next speaker's video, could you talk about in specific the UK and Irish market? What is taking place there on the medical front, and kind of what are patients looking for, and how are they accessing cannabis in that market?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, three different points. So the UK market opened up in 2018. The Irish market 2019, but a very slow burn. So these are very young, nascent markets which are developing at what was initially a slow rate, but what is now, thanks to the work of the industry, but also a sort of upswell from patients, really starting to accelerate. So but the Irish market is still small, but growing relatively well. It's at 50 patients now, to put it in perspective. It really is small. But the UK market is now in the multiple thousands of patients, and it really is on a curve where it's probably doubling in size every 2 months, something like that right now. So it's really starting to kick in. It's starting to be a real industry that people are paying attention to. And part of that, just as a quick sort of sidetrack, you'll see, you may have seen that the London Stock Exchange has recently opened up to medical cannabis companies. So the groundswell in terms of patient interest has also become a bit of a sort of groundswell in terms of retail investor interest and a few institutions. So the London Stock Exchange opening up has been a big market, a big moment for the market. But as I said, that's a bit of a sidetrack. If we focus in on patients, and as I said in my video, which hopefully came through okay, we're a patient-focused organization. That's why Grow exists. That's why we get out of bed. Our mission is to get quality cannabis to the patients that need it. And it's a really interesting market, the UK and Ireland, because it's really existed because of patients in the first instance. So to put that in perspective, and people in a lot of people know this anyway, but with pharmaceuticals, generally medicines are somewhat preordained from the top. So big pharma comes up with medicines, regulators approve them after years and years of process, and then patients hear about them. So with medical cannabis in the UK, what was quite neat is that this all began with patients and patient stories and patient passions. So the big opportunity that we focus on is grow, and that I think is the real market opportunity in Europe generally. And this goes to the point made, I think, by Matt from 1212 earlier, is there's a real brand interest piece where you can really relate to patients and to patients' interests, and actually have a conversation with them, have a dialogue with them, and talk to them about the medicine, educate them about the medicine. We as a pharmaceutical company clearly educate doctors, and that's a massive part of our job, unblocking the supply chain, making sure doctors are willing and able to prescribe. But also actually that piece around speaking with patients and sort of hearing their desires, hearing what they like, hearing what they don't like, educating them on terpene profiles and what it means, sharing with them sort of latest research. All of these things really move the dial. So I'll stop in a sec, but this is one of the reasons that we did deals with Aurora and Tilray and Columbia Care. It's because there's a huge opportunity in the UK to really appeal to patients and really actually obviously do the best for them medicinally as well, which is the most important thing.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate that. And next up here in the intro video side is Kevin Gibbs. So I'll play that and then turn it over to Kevin with a question.
My name is Kevin Gibbs, co-founder of Merida Capital Holdings. We are a cannabis-specific private equity fund. We manage approximately $500 million across our 3 funds, our co-investments, and our NASDAQ-listed SPAC. My responsibility inside Merida is operations across 45 cultivation, processing, and dispensary assets located in 5 different states.
Thank you, Kevin. And so, you know, the scope of how you're involved is quite large. Can you talk about some of that kind of branding and consumer facing from an operational point of view? How has your group and Merida kind of taken on that challenge of managing these assets, and how is it different in different markets that you're involved with?
So look, first of all, Anand, thank you for having me today. I think that given the relative youth of the industry, we're just starting to see some brands be able to cross state lines. I know we had an earlier guest that was talking about cookies, which has been one of the few that's really successfully been able to penetrate multiple markets. We're heavily dependent on our local operational partners. So in each state, we're actually under different brands based on the regulatory approvals we receive through the licensing process. So, but what we have been able to, take the synergies, Merida is invested in around 50 different portfolio companies. So we're able to take, some of those synergies and, related ecosystem parts and, kind of plug and play into all of our entities. So, for example, we're invested in a company called Premium 5 out of Canada. They're a top-notch extraction company. We're able to insert them into our processing licenses in various states to, be able to bring their product menu to, the companies we have, in Missouri and Michigan and Virginia and West Virginia.
Appreciate that. I'm going to keep the videos moving along, and then I'll open it up to the panel because it's an interesting linkage through the various speakers here. And so next up, let me just queue up the video here. We've got Rob Davis from Alt, and I'm going to share my screen and just queue up that video real quick.
Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Davis. I am the CEO and co-founder of Alt, Advanced Liquid Technology. Alt is a premium liquid cannabis company with a mission to enhance human potential through our proprietary nanotechnology. Our revolutionary THC beverage enhancing products are currently available throughout California, offering a completely elevated and differentiated consumer experience. Our focus is really to empower consumers to create their own experience through precision dosing, an incredibly fast onset, a consistent offset, a completely unique euphoria, discretion, portability, versatility, and adaptability of our liquid into any beverage. In addition to our retail focus, our technology allows us to empower third-party beverage and edible products through our wholesale and white label business. For more information on Alt and the cannabis and lifestyle platform we're creating, please visit our website, altlife.com, or our Instagram @altlife. My email address is robert@altlife.com. It's an honor to be a part of the 420 Cannabis Summit with all of you. A big thank you to Bar Capital and to the 361 firm for the opportunity. And I look forward to seeing you all on 420. Thanks so much.
So Rob, just on your product, how are you looking to reach your audience? You know, what is kind of the landscape you're looking at as you're looks like you're ramping up here? You know, and how do you differentiate yourself versus other products that are out in the market as far as your outreach?
Sure. A pleasure to be with everyone today. Just to give everyone a feel for what our product looks like, this is Alt in a 5-pack 10 milligram format. And we believe that a beverage is the future. We believe that the category will be one of, if not the biggest in the end. And with that belief, we have differentiated through both our brand and our technology. And so what I just showed you really empowers the consumer to create their own beverage experience, to decide how many milligrams of cannabis they want, to pour it into their beverage of choice. Our technology is a nanotechnology, which for everyone is understanding, by basic definition, breaks down the particle size of cannabis. That allows for much greater bioavailability and allows the medicine to bypass the liver, the blood-brain barrier. So you get almost immediate effects, more similar to smoking, 5 to 15-minute onset, 2 to 3 hour consistent offset, depending on individual and dose, and a very unique euphoria. And so we again have designed a product that we feel is completely elevated. It's encouraged to microdose. It's encouraged to help people enhance and define flow states. And our focus currently in California is to some extent in dispensary, but we're really focused more online, D2C, we believe. And based on the data that we're seeing, that that's where the majority of the consumers are buying the lower dose beverage products. And so our online focus will continue to be a bigger focus than in dispensary. And then it's a matter of looking kind of multi-state, international, to some of the markets with a little bit lower barriers of entry to that of California, to look to profitability and to scale and to brand awareness through those markets.
Great, thank you. And then last but not least, we have Jeff Graham from Pistol. Jeff, I know you didn't have a chance to record the video, I believe, but if you could give a quick intro and where you're focused in the ecosystem as far as working in the cannabis space.
Sure, thank you. Greetings from my garage in Northern California. I am an internet guy, pretty recent to cannabis. My background is in data science and research. I was head of research at the New York Times, director of research at Google, VP of market insight at Twitter, where I built the analytics team there. And my last job previous to cannabis was managing director at BlackRock, where I led globally marketing analytics. So I come from outside of cannabis. I joined the cannabis industry a couple of years ago, came in as head of business intelligence for a vertically integrated cannabis company. I joined cannabis because kind of for the same reason that I joined the internet industry 25 years ago. I see it as a similar opportunity in terms of growth and impact from a social and cultural perspective. So I'm CEO of Pistol. Out of the experience of working at NorCal Cannabis, basically I came into that business as the data guy and looked around and saw that there was very little data available for cannabis brands. It's a big market with that's very under-resourced from a data perspective. I started Pistol last year. We launched our product in February of this year, so about 10 weeks ago. We're now at $200,000 in annual recurring revenue. So our product has been quite successful. Just in terms of showing you guys what it looks like, we've built a mobile app that allows cannabis sales teams to prospect accounts, to keep track of their current accounts, to make sure that they can stay on the shelf, and then get information about local markets to understand what their competition is doing so that they can better prospect new retailers for them to get into. Finally, just in terms of my perspective from California, I'd offer that right now I see that brands are relatively weak relative to the power of retailers. The market is extremely dynamic, almost to the point of chaos, with huge turnover in terms of products and pricing. And right now, there's a big opportunity for brands to break out of the current equation from the consumer who is primarily focused on value and price. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that. And so I'll open the question up in a couple areas. And Kevin, I'll start with you. I know you've got a meeting coming up after this, and we were running a little behind. But could you? We got connected because of a particular asset you were talking to me about in Michigan, and so we haven't spotlighted kind of the Michigan Illinois space, but could you talk a bit more about 315 and kind of how that story developed when you guys got involved at Merida, and you know, some of these questions, and to Jeff's point, the brand space is quite crowded. How and who decides which brands you're kind of working with, and what the local market is looking for?
Yeah, so we actually met with the guys from 315 at the MJ BizCon in 2018, and it was actually a great conference for us. We got that deal done, and we got our deal in Virginia done as well. You know, 3 dispensaries. We've grown to 12 over the last 18 months. We've got another 8 in the development pipeline. We're building out a cultivation facility. We're inserting one of our portfolio companies from Merida into the processing lab there. So you know, we're excited about the market. A lot of competition, not as you know, Virginia has a high barrier to entry, right? There's only 4 of us, 8.5 million people. We're in Maryland. You know, we're one of 15 with you know, 6.5 million people. Michigan is more of a you know, free market where, you know, you sign up, you get a license, and then you go compete. And you know, we're excited about the market. You know, it's estimated to be up to about $3 billion, I think, over the next 2 to 3 years. And you know, knock on wood, we're having a lot of success with 315 in Michigan right now.
And could you talk a little bit about the supply chain part of that? You mentioned cultivation in Michigan, and one of the great questions that came up, actually, Lori Kibbe had kind of framed this for me, which I thought was great, is, you know, if you own the supply, you own kind of the quality to the customer. How do you guys kind of think through that in terms of working with different brands and making sure the consistency and the quality is there for the consumer?
Yeah, I generally agree with that. One thing we're starting to see, though, in Michigan is with all the cultivation assets that are coming online, there is a you know, somewhat of a glut of supply. And with our cultivation, you know, the small cultivation, it's not online yet. We have a big retail footprint, so we're able to give all the cultivators, you know, real shelf space, and that's actually been very attractive to a lot of the cultivators who, you know, are looking to try to move their product into a dispensary that doesn't have kind of a bias towards their own brands. So we're actually getting great pricing. We're getting great products, and you know, it's an interesting market. We're looking at the evolution of it. But if you would ask me 6 months ago, I would have told you that I think we need a massive grow in Michigan. Today, I don't think that's the case. I think a small grow to supply a certain percentage of your shelf space is adequate, and then I think there's a lot of supply coming online, and to be a you know, a fairly large retail footprint without you know, a large grow behind us gives those cultivators who don't have a big retail footprint, you know, a nice marketplace to place their products.
Thank you. And then opening it up to the other panelists, to grow alt and pistol. All of your models are transportable. I mean, in Grow's case, you're there with the patient, and as long as you're focused on the patient in different markets, you can continue, executing. Alt, if you have your formulation, you can enter different states and in different geographies. And pistol, you're focused on data. So as long as you have good access to the data side, you can execute. How do you see the opportunity in the next couple of years? Do you have a plan to kind of grow locally? Do you have a plan to kind of think more broadly? And I'll kind of just open it up with Ben to go first, and then Rob, and then Jeff, just in order of the appearance. And then we'll go into the breakout session right after this question.
Yeah, thanks, Anand. So look, we're doing pretty good in Ireland and in the UK. As I said, Ireland's small, but the UK is a really exciting market, and the Ireland will be. So yeah, look, we're happy what we're doing there, but we know our model will work elsewhere as well. So the market that we're looking at specifically at the moment is Germany. Germany's the biggest market in Europe, most established, most doctors, most patients, etc. So, but also it's a place where the patient focus that I've talked about a few times actually has really not been applied particularly well. I can't speak for the entrepreneurs and say they didn't have a patient focus, but it hasn't really been executed well at all. So we've been looking at Germany since 2018, actually 2017. And we feel that the model we've built in the UK is very well fitted to the German market. So we'll look at that. So I think in terms of us putting our footprint elsewhere, I'll point at Germany, but then there'll be other places that we look at. The other thing I'd say, the reverse of that is we're also looking always for better products, better IP, better brands. So one of the things that's interesting is we're currently looking at the US and looking at brands and IP and things that would be good for patients for us to bring back to Europe. And that's why it's great to sort of talk on these type panels, because to the extent you guys see stuff, obviously that would be very interesting for us. We think there's a huge opportunity, sort of to go back to my banking days, a sort of geographic arbitrage to find stuff that works very well in a more established market such as the US and bring it over to a less established market such as Europe and sort of fast forward the European market. So that's a big focus of ours.
Great, thank you. Rob, you want to give some thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah, to your point, Anand, we felt it was incredibly important to own our technology. We're one of the very few brands in the California beverage space that does have in-house technology empowering our products. And we felt that it was crucial for that scalability domestically, internationally. It's very, very difficult given the regulatory framework, given the taxation, the costs of operating in California to be highly profitable on the THC side. We believe that California is the mecca, so to speak, that it's important to build a brand here that you can then translate that brand into other domestic international markets much more easily. So we're happy with that decision and continuing to stay heavily focused on California. However, looking at profitability, we are very focused on certain states throughout the U.S. wherein we feel that the costs of entry, the barriers to entry are much lower, and the profitability is going to be much higher, in addition to certain international markets, which would connect the brand with kind of the rest of the world through gateway countries.
Thank you. And Jeff, your thoughts as well?
Yeah, we're currently have access to data to 91% of retailers across the US. We've started in California just basically to build our product that we can work with people locally to develop that. But we're rolling out to Colorado this quarter, and we hope to be in every rec legal state by the end of the year. That is the great thing, as you mentioned, about being a data company. We're a SaaS data company, so it's a platform that basically scales as an ancillary business that scales pretty well nationally.
Great, thank you. I see that the breakout rooms are opening up. Mark, I'm gonna ask for your help on how to get people into the different rooms. I know I'm on the tech side, here's the list of the moderators. Jim Hawk, if you could just give a quick primer on how the moderators should kind of run their session and how participants should engage there. And then after the breakout sessions, we're going to come back for a town hall. Given the timing, and I did catch up somewhat time, we'd like to do the town hall probably around let's say 2:20 or 2:15 is only about 10 minutes. So yeah, 2:20 or so, if we can circle back. So try to keep intros limited because most of you have heard the panelists and some of them will be participating, but try to dig into your areas in more detail. And Jim, if you have any other high level instructions, please go ahead now.
Yeah, so just very briefly, try to set the room at the beginning. So for example, this is the hemp breakout room, focus on the topic. Again, we want to keep intros very brief because the idea is to have substantive discussion, and we can pick up where we left off with some of the topics where there's more relevant conversation to be had. But try to focus the time. The breakout is obviously for discussion, and so we would really prefer that there not be pitching. And that's more or less it. Hopefully the moderators all have some thoughtful questions to be conversation starters, but otherwise I don't really think that's going to be much of a problem. So really looking forward to the breakout. Thank you, Jim. And then we'll circulate those thoughts back around 2:20, 2:25 in the town hall portion, which is always really great because we get to kind of summarize and see where things stand. So please join the one you're interested in now. I'm going to go to the tech one, and I'll see you guys back at around 2:20, 2:25. I think everybody's back. Mark, you want to run this town hall piece while I stuff my face with pizza and take myself off video for a second?
No, I think we should watch you eat the pizza. And
it's not a pretty sight.
I think everybody wants pizza. That was the wrong thing to say, but it's okay. All good. Well, what we do here, it's sort of our tradition. This really goes back to 2006 in New York City when I started Denison Connecting, which people like Kevin and Matt may remember in some incarnation, but we just go around and then come back together and see how we can help each other. Had nothing to do with finance or investment, but now we are trying to help each other find capital, deals, talent, all the rest. So, and otherwise how to educate each other, do other events. So since I can't really call on the tech, or I can, wow, that was fast.
I'm fast.
Yeah, a little right here on the lip.
It's a problem with having a beard. Actually, I'll wrap up, but Maddox was in the group and kind of gave perspective on the tech side. But on the tech front, it was interesting because our group consisted of folks that run, cultivation, vertically integrated cultivation, as well as folks that have been in the industry from an operator point of view. So I think some of the key takeaways were, number one, it's still very early days on the cannabis tech side. This is not anywhere close to other developed applications of tech in other industries. The valuation picture has changed where cannabis tech companies are focused on very scalable audiences and customer bases. And so there is a marked increase in valuations because a lot of these folks have been able to execute and grow in those platforms. And I think the other part is there's still a lot of parts of cannabis that are challenging on a scalability front because they have to do with specific regulations and specific geographies, and it's not uniform, and so it's a messy space in parts of the ecosystem. But I think those were the key takeaways.
Did anyone else from that group turn on and catch it? Or even if you weren't in that group, any other comments or questions on tech? And we'll keep it going. Jen?
Sure. So in the cultivation and breeding room, we had a diverse group of folks, and we were focused on sort of the question that I raised was the consumer demand for cannabis and how is this going to evolve over time and impact plant and genetics, and how are we going to use genetics to support different use cases for the plant. And so actually Greg Vernon, who's with us and has a company out of Canada and in Colombia, is actually doing this and thinking through this. So he has a couple of takeaways that he's going to share with the group right now.
We're a Canadian company, but we operate our cultivation operation in Colombia. Colombia has a 12-month process for registering each specific genetic. So it becomes really critical for us to identify something that we think is going to be successful on the cultivation front, but also meets market demand in the 12 or 14 month range. And I think this is really going to be a key issue go forward, because I think genetics, as they continue to develop, especially for specific applications, becomes really important for someone in our situation where we need to identify that genetic 12, 14 months in advance and get it ready and get it cropped. One of the things we were lucky, we identified and obtained some genetics for a very high performing CBG, and that's clearly identifies to us why this is an important aspect for what you're going to be growing, harvesting, and planting in 12 months from now.
Fair enough. Any comments, questions on breeding, cultivation, processing? If not, over to you, Jim.
Well, just that this is Lauren Taylor from Chicago. I was in the breakout room. I was just talking about how here in Chicago, the cannabis business in general has become a social justice issue. That the first round, for instance, of dispensary licenses that they gave in Chicago, there were no African Americans. And so a lot of the people that I know here in Chicago are actually thinking about, cultivation as, a way, to get, increase minority and more diverse participation in the industry.
We covered, when did you join, Lauren? Did you join when we had...
I only got in maybe about like 45 minutes after you guys started. I had some chores to do.
That's okay. Dashida, Dawson, and Shanita.
I did catch the end of that, and I just I said Dashida accepted my LinkedIn invite, so I think I'll be able to connect with her.
It's a KPI for me. You guys connect on things you share mutual interests on. Let me go back then to on brands, Jim.
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up on something that Anand said very early in the event, and that is he used the metaphor of LASIK in his glasses, which I thought was very good because there was a prop involved. So nice job, Anand. But I think one of the things that occurs to me about that metaphor is that like cannabis, LASIK is not for everyone, right? It's not everyone's bag, and not everyone's condition makes them a candidate. But for those that do need or want it, they can only get it because there was a structure in place to make it available. So, I thought that was important to put forth. So in the brand room, we had a great conversation and really culminating with, I think, what it means to be or what the qualifications are or goals for being a legacy cannabis brand. And I think that Jeffrey put it very succinctly, was that sometimes strength and price are proxies for quality, which may be kind of a deep dive thing on its own. But Lori helped to kind of clarify, along with some other folks' help, that really it's kind of this trinity of things. It's quality, pricing, and identity as a package that's required for market leadership. And that together with education, and this being the really important time for that education to the consumers, what will be important for leadership for brands.
Do you agree, Mr. Cookies, Matt Barron?
I think Matt jumped off.
No, Matt.
No, I'm on. Apologies, guys. I do. I do. I think people aggregate around brands. I think people tell their friends about brands, and namely brands with authentic and differentiated stories. I think that cannabis is moderately overwhelmed right now by labeling companies that are purporting to being brands, right? They're trying to slap a clever name or a cute logo onto a bag and open source their products, and it Coca-Cola isn't a successful cola company because it has the exact same cola as everybody else, right? Budweiser is not a successful beer company because it has the same beer as everybody else, right? There has to be something foundationally differentiated from you as a brand that you then weave a narrative around to differentiate yourself from the rest of the market. And I think that that's something that Berner has done remarkably well with cookies over a 12-year period, right? And you see a lot of new entrants that are trying to accelerate that process, and it's immensely challenging to do so, which creates a helpful and healthy moat for us. But I think that those points are well taken.
Anyone else on brands? So I think tech merged with picks and shovels. So then it came, this distribution dispensary was the, I guess the grow room.
Yeah, no, it was a smaller, more intimate conversation. But you know, just in terms of living here in Colorado and also just kind of giving my own thought here on the distribution and dispensary side, you know, I think that the marketplace, it changes over time, and even to the point that Matt was making on the brand side. I think originally people were looking at the dispensary was the brand. Now you're starting to see more differentiation as the market becomes more developed and also people's tastes and preferences grow, and there's a lot more opportunities. I think in terms of what we were talking, as we had, sorry.
Ben Langley?
Yeah, we had
Or
Ben.
Duncan.
Yeah, we had Ben and Duncan, but Ben obviously being in the UK, their marketplace is also still in the earlier stage in terms of where Europe is. And, you know, I think that he's doing a really good job, but the marketplace is developing. And I think that you really also have to look at, you know, your Oregon, your Washington, your Washington State, your California. I think all the markets are kind of developing in their own pace. And I think with Europe, I mean, it's still kind of moving ahead, and the model's growing and more acceptance. But it all comes down to a lot of education, a lot of opportunity sets.
By the way, the Sing dispensary, no have a special relationship with Ohio. They're giving out another 60-ish dispensary licenses.
Oh, are they? Well, the other thing too, just to add one more Colorado thing, was just that yesterday they passed a law of allowing for direct delivery as well as more social engagement and gathering places. So just as you kind of look at some of the markets that are a little more developed, and they're looking at creating a new type of license, and they are also looking at the social dynamics, because there weren't as many women or minorities that were involved in some of the earlier licenses that were given. So it is something that's being conscious and something that they're looking at to a number of the other conversations that were being discussed.
So let's talk about hemp. Mentioned you would talk about the trifurcated regulatory approaches. And Scott, I know you had slides. If you want to share your slides, if that helps.
If I could just interject real quick, Mark, I actually have to pick up my daughter from daycare at 2:45, so I have a hard stop. But I would love to catch Scott's piece, because I talked with Scott before, and I think he's got some very interesting parts. I just wanted to thank a few people in particular, all of the breakout room moderators, obviously Mark and Nessa and 361 Firm, but Michael Fields, thank you for the recruitment of great speakers. Jen Bassick, thank you. And Cedric, I think you're still on here. Yeah, there you are. Cedric Watkins as well, for the recruitment part. So appreciate that. And we'll see, I'm sure see you all pretty soon. But it really enjoyed today's summit. It was epic. It was beyond epic, I would say, versus how Mark had described it.
The key is to be catalytic. Where do we go from here? That's what I want to talk about. I'll debrief after you get your daughter without.
I'll circle back. Yeah, it's a recorded session, so I'll catch the end of the tape later. All right.
Great. Thank you again, Anand.
Thank you. Take care.
So
Thank you.
So I do want everyone to be thinking about that, because I think each of these can be their own deep dives. So go ahead, Scott, take it away.
Mark, you wanted to see a few slides? I'll show you
a
couple quick here.
Sorry, I'm just gonna say I have to go also. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was great to meet you all and hope to see you at the next one.
Absolutely. Hey, Jen.
Thanks, Jen.
Jen.
So everybody can see the slide now?
Yep. Yeah. Go for it.
Great. So I tried to just pose a few questions. Wasn't really sure what people's interest in the hemp side would be, whether it's going to be an extension of what we've seen grow in cannabis or whether it's going to be a complete departure. Obviously, my position is very different than a lot of the cannabis speculators would be. I see the purpose of our role in the short term is to create a more resilient and balanced economy on a state-by-state basis, so long as we have states kind of fighting for who's going to have the better regs. You know, our plan was to simply introduce a co-op that establishes a balanced ecosystem on a state-by-state basis that matches the industrial capacity with the farm capacity with the workforce capacity. And that's really what the HMP plan was about. So my questions were generally aimed at where people are interested, where they think we can accelerate, and where the support, you know, should go right off the bat. And there was a lot of questions. Cedric was on the call as well and had some great questions, as did Chaz and a few others, as to, you know, where do we go from here? And so, you know, I really just wanted to illustrate that, you know, the discussion on marijuana as a medical and versus a drug obviously are two separate, but there's so much more breadth to what hemp can do in an economic development capacity, a domestic economic development capacity, that's really where we wanted to focus. And some of the points I made were simple. There's 65,000 co-ops. 1 in 3 Americans already belong to a co-op, so it seems natural that we would want to take a position of de-risking farmers. And until we have proper banking, until we have proper investment, until we have proper insurance, there's always going to be risk on the farmers. And we think that we can put a lot of weight into you know, de-risking their position, and that's really what we were trying to go for. And part of that was all about compliance. And I thought it was important to mention that our Chief Compliance Officer, Vlad Kapusin, who's obviously someone that Mark and most of the folks at 361 Firm know well, left New York Life and joined us and brings a ton of experience to that space, which we feel honored to have, obviously, as that type of perspective and experience is going to be very valuable when investors, especially on the industrial side, do start to take industrial hemp more seriously. But, you know, centers of excellence, again, consensus and compliance, along with building community. The community is already there. You know, as we learn from most farmers, all of them have some experience in hemp if they've been farmers for more than a generation. It's just time to rekindle that relationship, and that's really where we went with that. So, if that helps.
Yeah, I think like, let's just take hemp for example. I'd love to dive in and, you know, just see, you know, see the size and the market dynamics, supply, demand. Yeah, and, you know, look, of course I'm a deal guy, so I look at all the transaction activity, and then we would be all smarter to figure out who to back and how.
You raise a good point, Mark, and that's partly why, you know, we initiated open dialogue and a strategic partnership with Central State University, Ohio State University, and we had research experience with a dozen universities over the last 6 years. And a couple of the questions I posed to a few of the people on your panels today that work in the data science went very simply. I'm like, when are you going to start covering hemp, and when can we start to put hemp on the map as far as, you know, the industrial impact that it possesses? And the answers were soon, but not yet. So hopefully we'll have some data to back up our interest.
How about, yeah, I was going to say the couple sources I thought of don't have that yet. But, you know, you obviously Brian Shing from ArcView or ex-ArcView, Asia Horizons has a hemp focus. And actually, we could easily have a huge hemp event. So what about other events, everybody, that people might like? Or other takeaways?
I'll tell you, the breakout session wasn't long enough for the questions that I had on hemp, so I would love to do a deep dive. If you want, I'm happy to organize it and put a presentation together, and we can go deep on that anytime.
Maybe that's that point. It's if you're new to us, we use the word co-leaders. Again, it goes back to my Denison connecting and Michigan connecting. Whoever wants to do it, raise your hand. We help you put it together. We just want it to be as best and thoughtful, and we try not to let one person, nothing against you, Scott, try to get a round table around everything. A 360, as we call it. So, you know, get 2, 3, 4 people, and
I'd be interested. I'd be interested in helping with that one.
okay.
Scott,
Scott, Cedric, I can even, what we do every Wednesday, so tomorrow at 10:30, we get together and we go to breakout rooms to get events put together, or even to brainstorm. So that's sort of how the cybersecurity, it took a series of those meetings. We're going to do Africa, right, Cedric?
That's right.
So,
which dovetails with hemp as well as impact and some of the other fantastic panels you guys have been doing since I've been participating.
Excellent. And Lauren, you've got your hand up again, or is that from before?
No, that was just signaling my interest in what you were proposing to set up there.
Oh, okay. So yeah, come on Wednesdays. That's sort of how the sausage making happens.
I mean, are you sending out announcements, or I guess I'm on your mailing list now.
If you don't, just reach out to me, M. Sainer at 361firm.com. You know, I think obviously what I think you're angling at, and it's part of our impact side, is inclusion and social justice. So that's just manifesting itself.
Yep. As we said here in Illinois and Chicago, even it seems like everything now becomes a social justice issue. Cannabis, cultivate cannabis business being one of them.
I think everything's social justice and fintech somehow. I don't know how that. We should probably merge the two more often. Anyone else on other events that you'd like to see? I mean, the tech group could merge with the venture side of our houses, do something, and obviously the ag side has done some things with the breeding cultivation. On brands, Jim, you've got people like Tom Jump, right? Our consumer facing side could be an interesting fusion. So I guess my request is just come on Wednesdays. We do them. Tuesdays are a little more free, and Wednesdays are breakouts as we try to plan these events. I mean, Kevin, that we're looking at doing insurance, bit of an insurance tech event, but you obviously have perspective there.
Yeah, any insight that I could add on the insurance side, happy to participate. I think as it pertains to cannabis and insurance tech, for the ecosystem of like mom and pops that just need basic like insurance to check the box, I think a tech solution for insurance would suffice. But when you're talking about like real companies, public companies raising money, they're not properly insured when they go through like some of these tech platforms.
I'd love to understand how big the insurance market is for cannabis and what's driving it. Is it are the debt guys, for covenants, or equity, institutional equity, just good practice by shareholders? Like what's driving it?
I don't make that connection between the shareholder and like driving like the.
So
I'm not sure exactly what you mean.
I look at that as risk management, just good, prudent risk management.
Why aren't they participating more broadly?
Or just what is driving it? It's either the debt covenants, some kind of equity or M&A covenants, or it's good governance.
Right now, the most important dynamic is the fact that the majority of meaningful insurance capital is completely on the sidelines. They're not participating at all.
All right, so there's nothing driving it.
What's driving it is a lack of, once safe banking passes or the Claim Act or this like phantom Schumer Act, which is yet to be kind of released. Once that passes, that's when when safe banking, opens things up for banks, that's when capital will start to flow for insurance companies. And it won't be overnight because there's still a lot of hair on this industry, but they'll be able to participate. Right now, they can't bank the premiums, and they don't have an understanding properly of what the risk landscape is. There's been 30 securities claims for publicly traded companies in cannabis space. That's not helping either.
Right.
It's going to be dicey for a long time, but at least once the regulatory environment shifts in favor of the industry in terms of a backstop and a lack of, the feds being a looming kind of, potential, threat, that's when things start to open up a little bit. It's going to take time though.
Fair enough. Any other final thoughts, takeaways, or otherwise?
No, I'm always interested, based on Kevin's comments about, the remarket for cannabis and how that's going to develop. And, I just think it's non-existent right now. And I think like any other mature space, it's got to be there, right, Kevin? I mean, it's got to come in.
Yeah, it's one step behind what I was talking about. So like I think that, it's not going to like waterfall, and all of a sudden the reinsurance markets are going to just kind of pop up and just provide billions on top of billions. I think it's going to happen a little more slowly. But, our head of reinsurance is having very active conversations with all the markets in Bermuda and London. And, we are prepared for that. So there's a lot of talk, there's a little bit of work, but it's still early on that.
There's another aspect which is interesting. We should get all the consultants who advise the institutional investors. And because I know there have been some breakthroughs, small ones, but in fact, you had one, I don't know if I can show him on my screen, but there's a pension that we're close to that's use a consultant, and now they feel that comfortable on certain ways to play cannabis. I think that's going to be a watershed when that starts to happen, and maybe this will help nudge that. But some people are taking their own views on that. I don't see Wayne Abrams. Yeah, there's some families that have been in this space for 5, 6, 7 years, and they're now doubling, tripling down. But I still think the smartest way to do it is to play. You'll hear this a lot from me. Is to play with the funds. I don't know if we have any funds still on. I'm not trying to suck up to you, but that's just they see more deal flow. Any other thoughts? Well then, I think we'll share some of the recordings and takeaways, and of which we'll try to get some of these dives happening over the next few weeks and months.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, everybody.
Great event, Mark. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Cedric.
Thanks, Mark.